Chapter 208 Blowing Them Away. As soon as Long Chen rushed out, Tang Wanner caught up and whispered, "Long Chen, I'll let you guys handle this side. Leave Guyang to us." Shi and Yi Zhiqiu rushed over to Guyang. Without even saying anything, the two of their auras exploded out as they began to crazily fight. The two of them held huge wind and ice blades as they fought against Guyang. Both of them already hated that Baldy to death. If Long Chen hadn't arrived now, they really might have launched a suicide attack to bring him to death with them. But since Long Chen had returned completely fine, their confidence had returned. Even if they lost again this time, with Long Chen present, they would quickly be able to chase up to them. Gu Yang also didn't dare be at all negligent in front of the two of them. He exploded out with his full force. The three of them were already old opponents. They immediately began fighting at full force. Gale winds whistled and explosions rang out over and over. Long Chen directly rushed into a sea of enemies. Behind him were also Song Mingyuan's group of three. The other disciples had all been left behind to defend. "Long Chen, I'll throw you out with the other trash." Of the enemies rushing to meet them, a core disciple was the fastest and arrived in front of Long Chen. He thrust his sharp spear at him. Long Chen recognized that person. He had once stood by him in support after he had killed those 5 traitors. But after he was exiled, this person had directly joined Gu Yang's alliance. Now he was also the first one to attack him. Long Chen supposed he was trying to show his loyalty to Gu Yang. The moment that spear neared his body, Long Chen used a single hand to tightly grab that spear, completely stopping it in its tracks. That shocked everyone. That was a core disciple, and his power was perhaps only slightly lacking in comparison to Lei Qiansheng. But his spear was caught by Long Chen just like that. His bone blade was still just resting on his shoulder. He had stopped that attack with just his left hand. Most shocking of all was that Long Chen's body hadn't moved in the slightest. It was like he was simply holding onto a child's plaything. That person hastily tried to pull his spear back, but he was appalled to realize his spear was unable to move at all while Long Chen's hand was clenched around it. He was unable to move it in the slightest no matter how hard to tried. While he was still shocked over this, Long Chen sent out a lightning-fast kick. Before that person could even react, he was kicked right in the stomach. The sound of bones breaking rang out as that person shot back like a cannonball. Long Chen's strength was too terrifying now. The other disciples who had been rushing forward ended up being smashed by that person, causing a burst of screams and snapping bones. Other than that core disciple, over a dozen people behind him had been struck, their bones breaking and vomiting blood. Long Chen then threw the spear. It shot out like a black thunderbolt towards that core disciple. It was incomparably fast. By the time he realized what was happening, that spear had already arrived in front of him. He was scared stiff, but that spear merely brushed past his cheek. That long spear sunk into the ground and immediately pierced straight through, leaving only a small hole to show where it had entered the ground. Just that toss had been incredibly powerful. If he had been struck by that spear, even 10 lives wouldn't have been enough. He was trembling with fear, his face completely pale. Looking at Long Chen, dread filled his eyes. One move, no, not even one move. He defeated a core disciple just like that. That stupefied everyone. From the very start, Long Chen had barely moved. He was still standing in his original position. All he had done was move his arm to capture and throw that spear. Just that had been able to defeat that core disciple. Lei Qiansheng and the others' expressions greatly changed. Long Chen hadn't revealed the slightest bit of aura just now or used a battle skill. He had defeated him relying solely on the strength of his physical body. Both parties had been about to start a chaotic battle, but Long Chen's one attack stunned everyone so much that they all stopped. Song Mingyuan's group of 3 were also completely shocked at that lazy figure with a bone blade on his shoulder. "Don't be careless. Everyone attack with your full strength. We're still much stronger. Just leave Long Chen for me and Brother Lei." Qi Xen shouted and his aura exploded out. A water blade appeared in his hand and slashed down on Long Chen. Lei Qiansheng also attacked with him, wanting to defeat Long Chen in the quickest time. Following Chi Xian's orders, all their people charged at the Heaven-Earth Factions Alliance. Other than that core disciple that had been heavily injured by Long Chen, there were still 3 other core disciples charging at Song Mingyuan, Li Qi, and Luo Tsong. Long Chen, don't think that some peak of blood condensation is anything good. In front of a muscle rebirth expert, you're still nothing. Chi Xian once more brought his water blade slashing down, this time erupting using his absolute full strength without leaving anything behind. Long Chen smiled slightly. That smile contained ridicule, despise, and absolute disdain. His wind blade finally moved, cutting across the space, causing heaven and earth to rumble. When the bone blade collided with Chi Xian's water blade, the water blade didn't have the slightest bit of power to resist and immediately collapsed. As for Chi Xian, he was sent tumbling across the ground, appearing incredibly miserable. When he once more looked at Long Chen, his eyes were filled with horror. "Eat one of my fists." Lei Qianshang heavily smashed his fist that was filled with thunder force at Long Chen's back. But Lei Qianshang was shocked to see that when his full force punch landed on Long Chen's body, all he did was tremble ever so slightly, not even needing to take a single step. He slowly turned his head to look at the shocked Lei Qianshang, raising his bone blade. "You can also eat one of blades." His blade whistled over at Lei Qianshang. As that blade slashed down, Lei Qianshang felt as if space had solidified around him. He smelled the scent of death coming for him. Thunder Shield. Light shined from Lei Qianshang's body and he raised his 2 fists in front of him. Countless strands of thunder force twined around him, forming a huge shield of thunder force. Boom! When the bone blade landed on that thunder force shield, the immense power caused the land to tremble, a wave of dirt surging out. Lei Qianshang's thunder shield collapsed. The ground beneath him had caved in, and he was extremely shaken, his internal organs seeming to have shifted. He was about to retreat when he felt a sharp pain from his stomach. Long Chen's foot had already fiercely stamped down on his stomach. Lei Qianshang was no longer able to endure any longer, vomiting out blood before being sent flying. Everyone was completely horrified by Long Chen. Just what level of monster was he? What had happened in the rubble wasteland for him to have become so strong? That first attack when he had defeated that core disciple was still understandable since that core disciple had been careless. But now Chi Xian and Lei Qianshang had fought with their full force and were still defeated by Long Chen in 1 blow each. Looking at Lei Qianshang, who was still vomiting blood, no one could believe their eyes. Elder Sun's pupils contracted. That was because he saw that Long Chen had yet to even use his cultivation base. All that had been from just his physical strength. Furthermore, he had previously received one of Lei Qianshang's fist without having any injury. One part of that was because of the golden horn python's skin he was wearing. But more importantly, it was because Long Chen's physical body was exceptionally abnormal, comparable to a 3rd-rank magical beast. Just what did that brat encounter in the rubble wasteland? How did he become so strong? A bit of worry appeared in his eyes. Long Chen's growth rate was too fast. As Long Chen grew stronger, his own chance of obtaining his secrets grew slimmer. He had to think of something fast. After sending Lei Qianshang flying, Long Chen once more began to slowly walk over to them. "I've already said that those who have a debt to me will have to pay back both that debt and its interest. With your sinister schemes you caused my brothers to bleed and caused my beauty to cry. Did you think that would just stay in the past?" With each step he took, Long Chen's murderous aura grew stronger. At the end, his surging murderous aura had practically turned solid. The current Long Chen really was like the Grim Reaper about to punish them for their sins. That bone blade would have to be his death god sickle. "Bastard, don't get so arrogant." Chi Xian and Lei Qianshang both roared, huge blades appearing in their hands and slashing down on Long Chen. Long Chen waved out his bone blade. Boom. Chi Xian and Lei Qianshang's blades were completely shattered. In front of that bone blade, their own blades were weak as glass. Those were powerful weapons condensed from their spiritual chi with the support of their runic power. And yet they were absolutely powerless in front of Long Chen's bone blade. A single collision would cause them to break. One reason was because Long Chen's own power was so exceptional. But the other reason was that bone blade was the tooth of a 4th-rank magical beast, and it was definitely the hardest weapon present. Back when Long Chen had found this tooth, he had almost passed out from joy. He had precisely been lacking such a hard weapon. It had required a week's time for him to grind down this tooth to form a handle for him. Within the rubble wasteland, he had run into countless dangers. He had relied on this bone blade to force his way through those dangers. The only regretful thing was that although this bone blade was incomparably hard, it was too light. Luckily, that flaw didn't stop it from being Long Chen's new favorite weapon. With this kind of powerful weapon, Long Chen wouldn't have to fight bare-handed against his opponents again. He could properly bring out the full potential of his body. As for Qi Xen and Lei Qianshang, they continued to frantically fight back. But Long Chen just continued to use the same move over and over. The instant their weapons would collide with his bone blade, they would immediately shatter. That would require them to condense a new one, which exhausted a terrifying amount of spiritual qi. That was especially true considering how frequently they exchanged blows. In just a couple breaths, they had struck out over 10 times, causing their spiritual qi to be exhausted. Even their faces were turning pale. Looking at that incense stick, the two of them cursed. Normally it burns so fast, so why did it burn so slowly today? It's about time to end this. Long Chen's expression was solemn as he raised his bone blade into the air. An unstoppable aura surged out of him. Chapter 209 Revenging Enmity. Feeling that unstoppable aura, both Lei Qianshang and Qi Xian's expressions were completely shocked. They felt their bodies tighten as they were actually locked in place. That was not the effect of a battle skill, but simply Long Chen's aura. It was incredibly shocking that he could use blood condensation aura to lock the two of them in place. Long Chen's bone blade ruthlessly slashed down. They were unable to dodge anymore, and so they could only take it head-on. Both Qi Xen and Lei Qianshang shouted, releasing all their energy to block that attack. Boom! The ground split apart and dust filled the air. Two wretched figures flew through the air, constantly vomiting blood. But before they had even touched the ground, another figure had already appeared in front of them, a huge bone blade once more slashing down. What? Lei Qianshang and Qi Xen were horrified, not imagining Long Chen would attack so quickly after his previous attack. That previous attack had already given them grave injuries. But now a second strike had come before they had even stabilized. Neither of them even had the chance to set up any defense. The bone blade smashed into the two of them, immediately sending them flying. The bone blade might be hard, but luckily for them, it wasn't at all sharp. If it had been a sharp blade, both of them would have been cut into halves. But even so, Long Chen's bone blade had directly broken quite a few of their bones. The spot Long Chen had sent them was towards the Heaven-Earth faction. Everyone let out a startled cry when they saw those two figures flying over. The two of them fell in front of them, their bodies already somewhat deformed. That stunned all of them. Were these really Monster Core disciples? How come in front of Long Chen they seemed as weak as rabbits? Hey, what are you waiting for? Don't you remember the torment they put you through? If you aren't going to take revenge now, when else would you? Long Chen shouted out to those stunned people. People were first too stunned to react, but then one person charged out and stamped his foot onto Lei Qianshang's face. Fuck your mom, last time you beat me so badly. I bet you never thought there'd be this day. Lei Qianshang had already had his bones broken by Lei Qianshang, and even his internal organs had been gravely damaged. Before he could ever understand what was happening, he was sent tumbling through the air by a kick from that person. Having sent Lei Qianshang with a single kick, that person laughed loudly. His suppressed anger was finally being released. You're asking for it? Lei Qianshang glared furiously at that person. You dare glare at me? Go fuck yourself. Seeing that Lei Qianshang still cursed at them, over 10 others all charged over to beat him. Last time he had charged into the Heaven-Earth faction on his own and given almost everyone at least a couple broken bones, completely humiliating them. Now that there was an opportunity to get revenge, they swarmed over him, pummeling both Lei Qianshang and Qi Exin. The two of them were heavily wounded, and Long Chen had already exhausted their spiritual qi. They were completely powerless against these outer disciples who they ordinarily could have defeated with a swat of their hand. Brothers, release all the suffering and humiliation you've had to endure. You don't need to bother with the flags. Repay them 10 times the humiliation they've made you suffer. Beat them to death for me. I'll wait, at least leave them with a breath. Long Chen remembered not to kill them at that last moment. Tang Wan'er and Yijiqiu's people swarmed over and crazily began to beat the two of them. As for the opposing alliance, they were still dumbfounded by Long Chen's strength. Other than the core disciples who were still fighting, the others were horrified, unsure whether they should charge forward or directly flee. Tang Wan'er and Yijiqiu's people crazily released all the anger they had been suppressed within them. But even in their fury, they still didn't forget themselves entirely. No one hit any vital points. And so most of their beatings ended up on their limbs in order to avoid killing them. Even Guoran had come to viciously stamp his feet a couple times. However, he was then pulled out of the way by others. His flag case got in too many people's way. As for the first core disciple Long Chen had beat, he saw what was happening to the two of them and blessed his luck. Although Long Chen's attack had been strong, he still was able to fight. But now he acted too weak to get up. That might be a bit embarrassing, but it was much better than the fates of Lei Qianshang and Qi Exin. Thinking about it for a moment, he just directly collapsed and pretended to have fainted. What was happening over here gave Gu Yang a shock, and while he wanted to go help, Tang Wan'er and Yi Zhiqiu refused to let him get by. Although it was impossible for the two of them to defeat him, they had more than enough power to block him temporarily. A surge of morale filled them when they saw Long Chen's amazing power. Long Chen, I'll kill you! Gu Yang roared furiously. All his tattooed runes lit up and his aura exploded. Lei Qianshang and Qi Exin were his allies, his left and right hands. Their disgrace was a humiliation for himself. If he couldn't reverse the situation, his fame would be tarnished. He no longer reserved anything, exploding out with his full force as he punched Tang Wan'er. Tang Wan'er's wind blades were destroyed by that powerful punch, and there was still enough force behind his fist for him to ruthlessly arrive right in front of her face. Ice Crystal Shield. A huge ice wall appeared in front of Tang Wan'er, blocking Gu Yang's fist. It also shattered when it met Gu Yang's mist. In just that brief moment, Tang Wan'er had already withdrew enough steps to once more summon her wind blades, sending them out to attack him. Both of them were actually shocked at how powerful Gu Yang really was. This was the first time he had fought with such strength. The two of them pulled out all their power to block him, not letting him pass. Victory or defeat would be decided by whether they could hold him back. That was because Long Chen had already achieved an absolute superiority on his side. As long as they could hold on, victory would be theirs. But the current Gu Yang was now like a crazy lion, constantly raining sharp attacks on them. Their wind and ice blades were constantly being destroyed, and it took everything they had to hold him back. Long Chen looked at the incense stick and saw that everything had occurred too quickly. It had only burnt down to the halfway mark. Seeing that Song Mingyuan's side was also doing fine, he decided to directly charge into the opposing alliance, aiming for one of the flag bearers. "Stop him!" That flag bearer was horrified and hastily shouted at everyone to protect him while he fled. Unfortunately, he had really overestimated his comrades. After seeing two powerful experts like Lei Qianshang and Qi Exin be defeated so easily, none of them had any hope of stopping such a monster. That flag bearer's shout actually immediately caused everyone to flee away from him, leaving only him standing in his original position. That flag bearer was struck dumb, quiveringly looking at Long Chen with fear. "Senior Long, please don't hit me. I'll hand over the flags." That person wasn't stupid. Seeing everyone had left him, how could he possibly face off against Long Chen? And now that everyone had fled, it wasn't like they could blame him for handing over the flags. In any case, it wasn't as if their core disciples could drive all of them out of their factions. They were all elite disciples, the best they could obtain. Long Chen was expressionless as he grabbed that person. Frightened out of his mind, that person babbled, "Please spare me. Don't kill me, don't kill me." The first thing that had popped into his mind wasn't that he would be defeated, but that he would be killed. That was because that scene of Long Chen killing those traitors was forever imprinted in his mind. That person let out a startled cry as he suddenly was thrown into the air by Long Chen. He tumbled a couple times and crawled up, realizing he was in front of the stunned Guoran. That personally celebrated that he hadn't been killed and respectfully held out his flags to Guoran. Guoran was delighted. Who would have thought that something like someone handing over their flags would occur? But he was just about to take them when he suddenly remembered what Long Chen had told him at the beginning. His expression changed and he raged, "What kind of attitude is this? Kneel and raise them above your head in offering. Did you never learn any manners? You tormented us for that long. Not crushing all your bones is already enough restraint on our parts. Do you believe me when I say I'll call all my brothers over and beat your head into a completely new shape?" That person turned to look at the people fiendishly glaring at him and sighed. He went down on his knees and raised the flags high above his head. "Please kindly accept my offering." Guoran's smile really was about to start blooming flowers now. After so much suffering, he had finally managed to release some of it back on his oppressors. He reached out and grabbed the flags, pretending to be indifferent. "Okay, you can fuck off now. Remember, next time you to take the initiative to bring them over on your own, understood?" I understand. I'll fuck off now." That person hastily fled back to his own faction. He was already rejoicing that he hadn't been beat up. At the same time he had a thought to withdraw from his faction. This competition really was too terrifying. He actually thought it'd be better to just be a factionless outer disciple. Once that person left, there were others who flew over to take his place. However, some of them possessed some more courage. To those people, Guoran extremely bluntly called over his brothers to give them a very nice fist and feet massage. Long Chen snatched all of their flags on his own. He sneered. This is what they got for not having any trust in each other. Without trust, how would they possess any military power? They would just be a bunch of scattered sand. They'd be fine if nothing happened, but as soon as they met a true threat, they all just looked after themselves. That was also why Long Chen hated those traitors so much. They had betrayed other people's trust. If they had instead been in a real fight, they would have caused everyone to die. "Long Chen, I'll kill you." Once Long Chen had stolen all their flags, Tang Wan'er and Yijiqiu were finally unable to hold back Gu Yang. He shot forward like an infuriated lion, his eyes spitting flames as he smashed his fist at Long Chen. Chapter 210 Ancestral Blood Support. The current Gu Yang really had gone berserk. Lei Qianshang and Qi Exen had been beaten to the point where they couldn't even crawl with imprints of people's souls still visible on their faces. Of the other core disciples, 3 of them had been entangled with Song Mingyuan's group of 3, while the other one was lying on the ground, appearing almost dead. Their alliance of 7 factions had all had their flags stolen, all because of Long Chen. By this point, the incense stick was quickly reaching its end. If he still didn't steal back those flags at this point, their 7-faction alliance would end up last. Careful, Long Chen. Tang Wan'er and Yijiqiu were not able to stop Gu Yang any longer. His control over his ancestral mark far surpassed their own, causing them to be at too great of a disadvantage. Long Chen smiled and gave Tang Wan'er a reassuring gesture. He then focused on the furiously charging Gu Yang. A flare of anger arose within him. That bastard had always been provoking him, saying that he would crush him into pulp over and over again. Long Chen had long since wanted to beat him up, but he had always been too weak. But now that he had reached the 10th heaven stage of blood condensation and he had this powerful bone blade, he no longer was worried, slashing his blade at him. Gu Yang roared and all the runes on his body lit up. Runes flared over his fist as his punch smashed into the bone blade. Boom. The land shook from their intense collision. Their attacks had actually been completely equal. Under Gu Yang's punch, Long Chen's bone blade was blown back. Long Chen borrowed that force to spin. his bone blade cutting a huge arc as it sliced back towards Gu Yang's waist. As for Gu Yang, although he had managed to block Long Chen's attack, he had still received a bit of a jolt and was forced back a step. That shocked Gu Yang, as Long Chen's attack was even stronger than Tang Wanner's wind blades. But while he was still shocked, Long Chen's bone blade had already spun in a crafty angle and was slicing towards him. He was given a fright and went to block. But Long Chen's angle of attack was extremely tricky, making it awkward for him to block it. He was unable to use any force in that position. That caused him to suffer greatly and he was sent flying. It wasn't that Long Chen had struck with too much power, but simply that his attack was too unorthodox for him. Gu Yang quickly stabilized himself in midair. He was extremely powerful and had plentiful combat experience. As long as his foot touched the ground, he would be able to once more take the initiative and attack. Unfortunately for him, the instant his foot was about to touch the ground, Long Chen's bone blade had already viciously slashed out. Gu Yang was both startled and infuriated. In these 3 consecutive blows from Long Chen, he hadn't had the slightest chance to take a breath, causing him to be at a disadvantage. Although he blocked this attack again, he immediately lost control over his center of gravity and was sent tumbling through the air. He only managed to stop again after dozens of meters, appearing extremely pathetic. The entire crowd was silent. Everyone knew just how powerful Gu Yang was. He had long since been acclaimed as the #1 figure of the monastery's new generation. But even he was unable to receive more than 3 blows from Long Chen before being sent flying. Some people even wondered if they had taken a blow to the head and were hallucinating. The person who had made Gu Yang powerless to retaliate was actually the one with the lowest cultivation base in the entire monastery. Lazily resting his bone blade on his shoulder, Long Chen sneered at Gu Yang. "Didn't you personally say many times that if I blocked your path you'd crush me to pulp? Now I have no choice but to doubt your words." Long Chen's voice was calm without the slightest bit of anger. And yet it was precisely this calm slap in his face that made Gu Yang even more infuriated. In Gu Yang's eyes, Long Chen had always been a minor character. He had never cared about him at all. But now he was completely humiliated by this minor character. Just now he had been too careless, and that was the only reason why Long Chen was able to turn his movements into a mess. And now he was using his mistake to insult him. Gu Yang roared and shot forward at Long Chen, punching out. Long Chen sneered and raised his bone blade, slashing it directly onto Gu Yang's bald head. How could it be possible for Gu Yang's fist to reach Long Chen before his bone blade reached him? Long Chen couldn't be bothered to fight with him head-on. Rather than striking his fist, Long Chen wanted to test how hard that shiny head of his was. Seeing Long Chen actually ignore his fist and aim at his head, Gu Yang was given a fright and hastily raised his fist to block. But his movements were too hurried and he was unable to release his full strength. He was again forced back by Long Chen's bone blade. He was only just about to restabilize when Long Chen's blade had appeared in front of him again. And so Gu Yang's tragedy once more repeated itself. Before his feet could touch the ground, Long Chen's blade sent him flying once more. Other than the first move being a bit different, the next 2 attacks were exactly the same as before. It was even the exact same angle and power. Most dumbfounding of all was that the miserable posture Gu Yang was sent tumbling through the air was exactly the same as the first time. Lazily resting his bone blade on his shoulder, he once more sneered to Gu Yang. "Didn't you personally say many times that if I blocked your path you'd crush me to pulp? Now I have no choice but to doubt your words." It was the exact same movement, the exact same expression, and the exact same phrase, completely infuriating and insulting Gu Yang. Gu Yang sinisterly said, "Long Chen, you dare to humiliate me?" Long Chen actually laughed. "Haha, who cares if I humiliate you? Aren't you someone who regularly humiliate others? What? Someone humiliates you once and you can't handle it? You really are a marvel. Can it be that despite being bald, you don't allow others to call you baldy? What goes around comes around. Since you like to humiliate others, then you have to be ready to be humiliated by others." Long Chen detested these geniuses like Gu Yang who had been pampered by their families to the point where they thought themselves to be emperors. It was like they expected others to just kneel in front of them automatically. These geniuses treated humiliating others as just a regular part of their lives, a habit that had already been ingrained in their bones. But when someone else humiliated them, it was like they had committed some kind of heavenly crime. Long Chen, you've really infuriated me. Gu Yang sinisterly glared at him, his gaze filled with killing intent. So what? If you get depressed over it, go over to Elder Son with the large bell. Just smash your own head onto it and death will solve all your problems. Plus you'll even get to hear such a nice bell sound in your final moments. It can count as having a good death. Long Chen pointed to the side. Gu Yang couldn't stop himself from taking this provocation. He felt even his lungs might explode from anger. He roared, his runes lighting up and now shockingly beginning to tremble. His runes seemed to come to life, moving slowly along his skin. He can activate his ancestral blood support. Both Tang Wan'er and Yi Zhiqiu were the most shocked. They had never thought Gu Yang's control over his ancestral mark had reached such a level. Gu Yang had not only awakened his ancestral mark, but he had a perfect connection to his ancestral mark's power that allowed him to activate his ancestral blood for further strength. Activating the ancestral blood support was a kind of secret technique. Someone with an ancestral bloodline could ignite a portion of their essence blood to multiply their strength for a short period of time. Gu Yang was actually so powerful. Tang Wan'er and Yi Zhiqiu looked at each other in dismay, seeing the other person's disbelief. Long Chen, I'll kill you. Gu Yang's runes moved over every inch of his body. From a distance, it looked as if countless insects had crawled over his body, causing anyone who saw it to feel terrified. Gu Yang's aura had exploded out to a shocking level, to the point where even those senior apprentice brothers who were watching could sense the pressure. This Gu Yang really is a monster, exclaimed one of the law enforcers. Although that had also once been new disciples, their generation's core disciples had definitely not been that terrifying. There hadn't even been a single genius who had awakened their ancestral mark in that generation, let alone a monster as terrifying as Gu Yang. Everyone was now completely focused on the two of them. Long Chen's return had completely reversed the state of the faction competition. But now that Gu Yang had finally erupted out with his greatest strength, it still wasn't sure just what the final result would be. Long Chen will help you. Tang Wan'er and Yi Zhiqiu both walked up to Long Chen, taking a stance to fight against Gu Yang with him. That was naturally because the two of them had the greatest understanding of just how terrifying Gu Yang was. Only with all three of them together was there a chance of victory. But Long Chen smiled at them and betrayed both their expectations. No need. Some things have to be done personally, for example, revenge. Seeing Long Chen's seriousness, Tang Wan'er immediately understood what Long Chen was thinking. Long Chen was planning on returning all the humiliation that everyone in the Heaven-Earth faction had had to suffer. Although she was still a bit worried, she still nodded in the end and took a couple steps back. Long Chen might normally be a mischievous rascal without the slightest air of arrogance, but that was because his unyielding arrogance was buried deep within his bones. A man didn't necessarily need to possess an air of arrogance, but he needed to have an unyielding pride within him. Long Chen was precisely like that. He was now completely infuriated with Gu Yang, Qi Xian, and Lei Qianshang's despicable schemes. Although Long Chen had never said it to anyone, he had all recorded all that enmity within him. So what he wanted to do now was just one thing: revenge. Yi Zhiqiu stared at Long Chen and also withdrew. Long Chen was the only one remaining to face Gu Yang. That figure that wasn't overly tall or large, but he was filled with a domineering disdain for all, an existence nothing within heaven and earth could stop. That kind of profound arrogance was something that didn't even place heaven and earth within its gaze, one that would tear apart the very dome of the sky. Space trembled as Gu Yang's runes finally stopped moving. However, his current aura had already advanced to a terrifying realm. Long Chen, since I said I'd crush you to pulp, I definitely will. Gu Yang, whose ancestral blood was now supporting him, was completely terrifying. His voice was hoarse like scraping iron, and his face was completely sinister. Die! Gu Yang roared and stamped on the ground. The entire land shook as he charged at Long Chen. But even such a powerful genius who used brute power to suppress all others was actually losing despite Long Chen fighting him head-on. That's just because Long Chen is relying on his weapon. If Long Chen also dared fight bare-fisted, senior brother Gu Yang would crush him to death with a single punch, icily said one person from Gu Yang's faction. Although they were no longer fighting, everyone was still standing at the edges glaring at the other party, ready to fight at any moment. Tisich, weapons are also a kind of strength. Your logic is just a fart. According to that, then Gu Yang also shouldn't have used his ancestral blood support. If so, then senior brother Long Chen would have crushed his bald head easily, loudly retorted a disciple from the Heaven-Earth faction. What crap! His ancestral mark is his innate talent, a sign of his strength. Why wouldn't he use it? Raged the first person to speak out. Someone from the Heaven-Earth faction's side immediately cursed. Senior brother Long Chen's bone blade is something he obtained from the graveyard of the exiled. That's a symbol of his glory, so why shouldn't he use it? That's just Long Chen's dog's hit luck. All he did was find a treasure, otherwise he would have been turned into magical beast crap. That person's words immediately ignited everyone on this side's fury. Before this, the two figures they cared about the most would have to be the two goddesses Tang Wan'er and Yi Zhiqiu. But now Long Chen had become another one of their idols. Their worship of him was not at all inferior to their worship of the two goddesses. They would not allow anyone to insult them. One person immediately charged out and punched that person right in the nose. Who the fuck asked you to be so blind? That person's bones broke and he let out a miserable shriek. But even after that punch, that disciple of the Heaven-Earth faction still hadn't released enough of his fury. He shouted to his allies, "Brothers, they dare insult senior brother Long Chen like this. That's completely intolerable. Do you still remember how they bullied us? Right now we don't need to fight over flags, but let us men all fight together to relieve our resentment." Following that person's shout, all 5 factions in the Heaven-Earth faction's alliance charged forward. Other than the flag-bearers, every single disciple was like an angry bull. Previously none of them had really fought since Long Chen had suppressed all the enemies on his own to the point that they hadn't even dared to resist. So much of their anger had already been relieved. However, they still didn't find it to be that satisfying enough. Now that someone had insulted Long Chen, they finally had an excuse to beat them. Amongst cultivators, there were few who weren't battle fanatics. With one person taking the lead, they all exploded, charging at their opponents. A huge fight immediately erupted between both parties. As for Song Mingyuan and the other core disciples, seeing that they couldn't participate in Long Chen's battle, they all began to fight their opponents once more. Explosions continuously rang out from Long Chen's side. Chi waves continuously shook the land, but this side also wasn't at all inferior either. Victory was already assured with the flags. With Tang Wan'er and Yi Zhiqiu there, no one could even think about snatching their flags. So everyone could just ignore their flags and fight only for themselves. On the other side was one core disciple faking that he was injured, as well as Lei Qianshang and Qi Exen, who had long since been beaten to the point of near death. Their morale was already near rock bottom. Then adding on that they didn't want to fight at this point, they were all beaten like stray dogs, wailing and crying. The distant Ling Yunzi, who was observing, sighed. The trash really is intermingled with the good. In this generation of disciples, the strong really were much stronger than before, but the weak were also so weak. Most importantly, their actual temperaments were far too lacking. Even that previous life and death trials still hadn't caused them to mature. Long Chen's side was all full of vigor with firm determination. Even though they had had to suffer much humiliation before, not one of them had withdrawn from their faction. In comparison, Everyone on Gu Yang's side had already frightened to the point that they didn't dare fight. Their flags had been directly exposed to the enemy without a single person guarding. At that time Tu Feng had turned green, wanting to smack those idiots to death. If that had been a real fight against experts of the devil path, not one of them would have survived. He really did well to kill them. Tu Feng grit his teeth. He was talking about those traitors who Long Chen had killed at the beginning. Only with trust and mutual protection could a squad truly become powerful. And it was precisely because of that absolute trust that betrayal hurt so much. In fact, if it happened again, Tu Feng wished he could turn Long Chen's punishment into a reward. This clearly proved Long Chen had been right to act as he had. Gu Yang's alliance had been completely blown apart by their own selfishness. Without any care of their comrades, they were blown apart like a pile of loose sand. We really have let Long Chen down. We should have rewarded him for doing as he had instead of punishing him, sighed Tu Feng. Ling Yunzi smiled. Here you go again. Divergents have their own paths that no one can change. And furthermore, do you really think it was a punishment for Long Chen to be exiled to the rubble wasteland? When he said that, Tu Feng immediately realized that after being exiled there, Long Chen had actually become many times stronger. Then did that mean that was all fated to be? Thinking of that, Tu Feng shut his mouth. His reverence for the heavenly Taoist deepened even further. Elder Sun was filled with greed as he looked at the divine ring behind Long Chen's back. Currently he had reached a bottleneck in his cultivation. If he could obtain Long Chen's miraculous technique, there really might be a chance of him breaking through. That was because Long Chen's divine ring could crazily absorb energy from the world. If he could obtain it, then by using it while he attacked the barrier between realms, he would have that little extra push that may let him break through. When advancing, it was precisely just that little bit of strength that was always lacking. It might seem like just a little bit, but it really was like a heavenly chasm that you might never be able to cross in your lifetime. Boom. With another explosive sound, Long Chen's bone blade sent Gu Yang flying again. Bastard, I refuse to believe this. My strength is the greater. Gu Yang furiously roared, once more charging at Long Chen, his fists flying crazily. But you have yet to crush me to pulp, icily replied Long Chen. Once more brandishing his bone blade, he forced Gu Yang back. With this bone blade, he was finally able to properly bring out more of his force, which pleased him greatly. He wasn't the same as Gu Yang, who could use his ancestral blood support to strengthen his fists to the point that they were as hard as weapons. Furthermore, he had never learned any high-class bare-handed fighting techniques. So only by wielding a weapon could he release his full potential. This time he was able to fight to his heart's content, giving Long Chen an unprecedented feeling of delight. But Long Chen really was shocked at how powerful Gu Yang was. Even with his divine ring as support, fighting at his full force was still greatly exhausting. Having reached the 10th heaven stage, his power had increased greatly, but his rate of exhaustion had also increased. But as for Gu Yang, even after fighting this long, his strength had yet to decline in the slightest. If this continued, he really might end up running out of spiritual qi first. Stealthily glancing above, he saw that the incense stick was almost completely burnt out. Boom! Gu Yang drew back again, grinding his teeth. He was unable to accept such a result. With my final blow, I'll smash you to pulp. Gu Yang shouted, and the countless runes on his fists disappeared. His fists instead turned black, almost appearing like steel. I'll let you taste my Gu family's Yang Flame Fist. A powerful aura that immediately locked Long Chen in place. Space trembled as his fist cut across the space, smashing at Long Chen. Chapter 212. Your fist isn't strong enough. When Gu Yang's fist formed, his face turned pale as paper. But despite that, his expression was still as sinister as ever. That fist now contained his entire strength and energy, including an overdraft of part of his ancestral mark power. You want to finish this in one move? Come. Long Chen raised his bone blade, his Feng Fu star circulating. All his spiritual qi injected into his bone blade. Split the heavens. Long Chen shouted inside and his bone blade began to rumble. It was almost possible to hear the roar of a tiger emanating from it as it slashed down on Gu Yang. When that fist and blade met, heaven and earth seemed to lose all sound. A brilliant flare of light immediately exploded out. Boom! The void appeared to shatter, chi waves surging everywhere, immediately engulfing an area of dozens of miles. An immense crater was smashed into the ground, and the distant spectators had practically been buried alive. When some people managed to dig their way to see what had happened, they were completely speechless. Dong! At this moment the bell rang out, signaling the end of the faction competition. But whether it was the winners or the losers, none of them cheered or made any sound. They just blankly stared at that crater. At the bottom was a completely pale Long Chen. He was gasping for breath. Opposite to Long Chen was Gu Yang. He was lying on the ground, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. He was filled with disbelief. One of his arms had been broken in several places, bending in extremely odd ways. If you want to crush me, Long Chen, to pulp, then your fist isn't strong enough. Long Chen shook his head lightly. Gu Yang's expression became even uglier. But as he opened his mouth to retort, he suddenly vomited out blood and fainted. In that last attack Long Chen had pushed split the heavens to his max, causing its power to reach a kind of pinnacle. For Gu Yang to be able to survive such an attack already showed how incredibly terrifying he was. But even if his physical body had been stronger, he was still heavily injured. At the same time, Long Chen realized that as his cultivation base increased, split the heavens power also rose with it, becoming increasingly terrifying. He still had no idea what class of battle skill it was. But this definitely confirmed its class was definitely shockingly high. Once Gu Yang fainted, Long Chen smiled. A bit of that suppressed anger had finally been relieved. He was about to put away his bone blade when he suddenly felt the world spinning around him. Just at that moment, a pair of soft hands gently supported him. A faint fragrance floated into Long Chen's nose, filling him with warmth. Exhaustion beat him and he passed out. Looking at the passed-out Long Chen, Tang Wanner's heart ached. For him to have returned from the graveyard of the exiled, perhaps he had met countless dangers, more dangers than another person would see in their entire lifetime. Woot, we won! Cheers rang out as people from her side began to crazily shout, showing off their excitement. Tang Wanner lightly rubbed Long Chen's cheek. There was a bit of dirt as well as some stubble now. But those things actually set off Long Chen's resoluteness. In the past 2 months, it seemed Long Chen had once more matured a great deal. This scoundrel, no matter how much bitterness he goes through, he never tells anyone. Tang Wanner's tears dripped down. Yi Zhiqiu walked over and gently patted her shoulder. Let's go back. Long Chen needs to rest. She nodded. At this point, a bunch of other people also came over with a stretcher, bringing Long Chen away. The others who had been injured were waiting to be healed. But Tang Wanner had examined Long Chen's body and seen that he had simply run out of spiritual qi and was exhausted. He wasn't actually injured, and so she directly brought him back. Once they left, the healing hall's disciples came out to heal everyone. However, Gu Yang, Lei Qianshang, and Qi Xian's wounds were extremely severe. That was especially true of Lei Qianshang and Qi Xian. Their bones had been trampled on. They had done too many wicked things up to this point, and that was their vengeance. Those disciples who hadn't been able to fight back against them before had taken this chance to beat them without holding anything back. That seed of hatred had long since been planted. But that seed really had matured too quickly. In just 1 month, they had taken their vengeance. If it hadn't been for Long Chen giving everyone a reminder, perhaps some people really might have been lost their reasoning within their fury and beat the two of them to death. But although no one had done that, those fellows had not been kind at all. They avoided vital spots, but they also made it so that they wouldn't pass out, causing them to see and suffer all their beatings without being able to do anything. Seeing the two of them want to cough up blood from their rage, everyone's felt much more free and relieved. Due to their heavy injuries, Lei Qianshang and Qi Xian were sent directly back to the healing hall for some senior disciples to heal. But even their senior disciples would probably require over a week to let them be able to walk out. The rankings were already announced. The Heaven-Earth faction's alliance took the top 5 spots. The other rankings were left to Guan Wenan and them. As for who was what exact rank, that would be up to them to decide. When Guan Nan looked at all this with a complicated look, seeing the Heaven-Earth faction lead their people away, he also brought his people away. Other than the heavily injured being sent to the healing hall, the others would all be fine after just 1 or 2 days of recovery. When everyone had scattered, a large group of people came over. That group was those people who had decided to stay behind despite failing the disciple trials. They were not disciples of the monastery. They could only count as some workers and could only receive a meager amount of resources. And yet they had no complaints. That was because they had seen an even broader world after coming to the monastery. It was at such a place that they could temper themselves. Seeing that group of people busily cleaning, Ling Yunzi frowned slightly, seeming to think of some distant memories. Long Chen's lack attack seemed somewhat familiar, but I actually can't remember where I've seen it before. Perhaps I've just heard about it somewhere, Ling Yunzi muttered to himself. That attack is extremely frightening, but I have a strange feeling that Long Chen is unable to completely wield its entire strength. According to normal cultivation standards, a powerful battle skill cannot be used without a powerful cultivation base. It isn't that you're unable to use it, but simply that your meridians wouldn't be able to endure using it. But Long Chen's attack is still far from reaching that move's true power. It really is curious. Tu Feng also nodded. The two of them were the monastery's strongest experts. Ling Yunzi had even stepped into the legendary Xiantian realm, and yet he was still unable to see through the origins of Long Chen's attack. This time Long Chen slept very well. It really was excellent to sleep at home. After all, even with his courage, the last 2 months he had been scared for almost every single second. There was no way around it. In that kind of place, Long Chen was near the bottom of the food chain. A slight mistake would lead to death. In the past 2 months, he had never had a good night's sleep. Every day he had crazily increased his cultivation base, increasing the chance that he would be able to survive. He slept for a full 3 days before finally awakening, feeling completely full of energy and excitement. As soon as he walked out of his room, he saw Qin Yu and Tang Wan'er cultivating. He immediately startled the two out of their meditation. "Sorry to disturb you," apologized Long Chen. "We weren't in a true meditative state. We've been waiting for you this whole time. Come sit." Sister Qin Yu prepared a bunch of delicacies for you as a reward. Tang Wan'er pulled Long Chen over, smiling brightly. "Really? I didn't even know Sister Qin Yu could cook," exclaimed Long Chen. "Hee hee, I bet you didn't know Sister Qin Yu's cooking skill can be praised as top class. She's never let anyone else know that. This time Sister Qin Yu only decided to cook for you as your reward," laughed Tang Wan. Qin Yu smiled and returned to the kitchen. Or Long Chen supposed she had, since he had no idea where the kitchen even was in here. Tang Wan'er smiling continued looking at Long Chen. She didn't say anything more. It seemed as if quietly looking at Long Chen was actually something quite enjoyable for her. "Beauty Wan, if you look at me with some adoration, I really will get embarrassed. Have you finally thought it over and decided to give your heart to me?" suddenly asked Long Chen. "You wish." Tang Wan'er angrily rapped Long Chen. "When will you stop being so infuriatingly flippant?" Other than when fighting and killing, it seemed this scoundrel never could be serious, annoying Tang Wan'er endlessly. You wouldn't even be able to talk to him properly for more than a few seconds before he irritated her enough to want to beat him up. "Then do you like it when I'm flippant or do you like me serious?" laughed Long Chen. "Of course I like it when you, scoundrel, don't even bother with that. Who would ever like you?" Tang Wan'er almost fell for it before cutting herself off. Looking at her light fury, for some reason Long Chen felt he really liked it when she was like that. Did that mean he was a bit abnormal? Just as Long Chen's was pondering over whether his own beauty standards had problems, Qin Yu returned. There were over a dozen piping hot dishes releasing a fragrance that made him drool. Long Chen's stomach rumbled loudly. Tang Wan'er and Qin Yu laughed. Long Chen explained with some embarrassment, other than magical beast meat, I didn't have anything else to eat in the last 2 months. For the first month it was alright, but then it really was starting to get disgusting. Hee, I finally get to eat something good. Qin Yu sighed. Long Chen, this time it really was hard on you. Once Qin Yu said that, Tang Wan'er's eyes turned red. Long Chen hastily said, what was so hard about it? It was just a little journey. Quick, eat before I starve to death. Long Chen laughed and directly picked up a mouthful of food. Originally he was just planning on changing the subject, but the instant he tasted that food, his eyes immediately lit up. From that moment on, his chopsticks never left his hands and his mouth was never empty as he crazily stuffed himself. Qin Yu's cooking skill really was top-notch. Furthermore, she had also added in many vegetables to the dishes, which made Long Chen, who had constantly been eating meat, to become like a ravenous wolf. Seeing Long Chen wildly devour his food, Qin Yu was delighted. She and Tang Wan'er ate together with him. After eating, Long Chen felt he really was unable to stuff anything more down. Even just opening his mouth, he felt his throat was still full of her delicious food. Long Chen belched and patted his stomach, completely satisfied. Suddenly he cast a vague glance at Tang Wan'er. Sister Wan, I've got something fun to do with you that you mentioned before. Long Chen smiled at Tang Wan'er mysteriously. Chapter 213 Lightning Refinement. Long Chen and Tang Wan'er requested a leave of absence from the monastery. They then left from the monastery's gate and began walking northwards. Disciples had to request for leaves of absence from an elder if they wished to go outside the monastery. Furthermore, they were not allowed to leave for too long. The two of them had put in 7 days' time. Long Chen, where are you bringing me? Tang Wan'er was still in the dark. Didn't I tell you? We're doing something fun, laughed Long Chen. If you won't be serious with me, I won't bother with you any longer, sniffed Tang Wan'er somewhat angrily. Don't get mad. I need you to help me out a bit for a certain something. But before that, I still need to go find Little Snow, explained Long Chen. Little Snow? You mean your Scarlet Flame Snow Wolf? Didn't you tell your family's people to bring him back? Asked Tang Wan'er. Long Chen smiled bitterly. I came by myself. I didn't have anyone from my family present. Only then did Tang Wan'er remember how Long Chen had traveled on his own. She awkwardly asked, then where is Little Snow? Long Chen looked around. This is where we agreed to meet. Look, there's Little Snow's footprints. He should be around here somewhere. Suddenly Long Chen let out a long roar that shook the sky. His majestic roar immediately spread hundreds of miles. That roar echoed out for the time it took for an incense stick to burn before finally fading away. Long Chen was a bit baffled. Maybe Little Snow is hunting, he guessed. Then what do you want to do? You want us to wait? Asked Tang Wan'er. No need. I'll tie one of my clothes onto a tree. He should be able to figure out I came here to find him. Once he sees my clothing, he'll know to wait for me. Long Chen took off his outer shirt and tied it to a large tree. Little Snow's sensitive nose could easily find it. Once he did, he'd definitely know Long Chen had come by and he'd wait here for him. Tang Wan'er asked, then what do you want to do now? I'm bringing you to do something fun. You'll definitely like it. Long Chen directly rushed off. Scoundrel, hurry up and tell me. Tang Wan'er followed behind him angrily. This fellow really did like to act all mysterious. The two of them rushed over 1,000 miles north, arriving at the top of a huge mountain. This mountain was extremely high, and above the peak were rolling black clouds. Flickers of lightning appeared every now and then. Looking at those black clouds above, Tang Wan'er suddenly recalled something and her eyes widened. Long Chen, don't tell me you came here to be struck by lightning. You really are smart. Yup, you guessed right, laughed Long Chen. On his journey back from the rubble wasteland, he had passed by this region and seen that this place was a bit strange. The mountain peak would always be covered by black clouds with lightning within them. This entire mountain peak was completely bare. It was definitely a good place to gather lightning. He had once refined Lei Qinshang's Thunder Force seed, so his body already had a certain resistance to thunder and lightning. Furthermore, his meridians were able to contain thunder force. He hoped that if he could obtain a stronger thunder force, it might be possible for him to nourish and use that thunder force like his beast flame. Most importantly, having advanced to the 10th heaven stage, Long Chen was very worried from his experience in advancing from the Qi condensation realm. He had to be cautious. Once he reached the 13th heaven stage, he would be struck by that heavenly punishment. The previous heavenly punishment had almost killed him. If it hadn't been for the spirit world's expert giving him a warning, he wouldn't have been able to resist his terror and would have already died from that tribulation. Furthermore, she had told him that the first tribulation was only a test of his willpower. If that was true, then when he advanced to tendon transformation, it would definitely be even more terrifying. Just a test of willpower had almost turned him to ashes. If it was a test of his physical body, wouldn't he have been directly killed? Although his physical body was much more powerful now, he was still filled with fear and caution towards that heavenly punishment. The first time was already that terrifying. Just how horrifying would be the second time? He naturally didn't want to die under heavenly punishment, and so he had to make himself even stronger. Previously he had refined Lei Qianshang's thunder seed, and so he had gained a control over some thunder force. So while coming here was still a risk, it was worth it. If he could absorb the thunder and lightning from the sky, he might be able to borrow that thunder force to temper his body, giving him greater resistance to lightning in the future. Even a slightly greater resistance would give him a higher chance of surviving the next heavenly punishment. Long Chen took out a large kite 21 meters wide from his spatial ring. The frame was made from magical beast bone and then normal beast hide was added as cloth, making it very sturdy. "You've flown a kite before, right?" asked Long Chen. "I've flown a kite, but not a man kite. You can't really be serious." Although Long Chen could control a bit of thunder force that had just come from a person, it was not at all the same as natural thunder force. Natural thunder force was at least thousands of times stronger. A mistake meant death. Gathering natural thunder force to use as his own was definitely a crazy idea. She had never even heard of anyone attempting such a thing. She had no confidence in this at all, but seeing how Long Chen was so prepared, it seemed he wasn't joking around. In Tang Wanner's eyes, Long Chen had never done anything normally. He always treated abnormal things as his normal. Long Chen took out a string made black silk. Tying it securely to his kite, he tested it a couple times before being reassured. After all, this matter definitely could end up killing him if he wasn't overly cautious. The string was over 3,000 meters long. Although it was only the thickness of a single finger, it would definitely not break. He then tied the other end of the string to a huge boulder. "I'll get on top of the kite and tie myself onto it securely so I won't fall off. You let me fly into the sky, but always pay attention. When I'm about to be struck by the lightning, let go of the string. Although it doesn't conduct electricity, it's not an absolute insulator. If I end up passing out or something, you need to be ready to save me." Tang Wanner solemnly stared at Long Chen, her heart pounding out of her control. "This is way too terrifying. You really shouldn't do this. To be honest, I'm terrified for you." Long Chen laughed. "Don't worry, I'm not scared that you're terrified. This is extremely important to me, so please lend me your assistance." Tang Wanner helplessly shook her head. She wondered to herself if she would also become crazy if she stayed with Long Chen for too long. "I'll run with the kite, get lift off, and then jump on top of it. The rest will be up to you. Just treat it as having fun." Long Chen tried to ease her nervousness. Tang Wanner glared at him. What about this was fun? If she made a mistake, he could die. Long Chen raised the large kite and began to run down the mountain. After a couple hundred meters, he had generated enough inertia and lift to finally slowly float upwards. Currently he was still extremely stable and secure. When Long Chen flipped to get on top of the kite, Tang Wanner nervously pulled on the string. Her kite flying skills were definitely supreme, as with just a few tugs, the kite soared into the sky, flying levelly. Standing atop the kite, Long Chen gave Tang Wanner a thumbs up. "You really are awesome, Beauty Wan." Careful! Tang Wan'er suddenly let out a startled cry as a bolt of lightning directly crashed down on Long Chen. Bang! Long Chen's clothing burst apart. But he had already been prepared for that, and he was still wearing the golden horned python's leather skin, so at least he wasn't naked. Currently the kite was still only 150 meters from the ground. He hadn't expected to already be struck by lightning while he was still so far from the clouds. The kite trembled, but the string Long Chen had tied to his waist hadn't broken. He coughed up some smoke and felt all his hair stand on end. Countless strands of lightning crawled over his body. He quickly attempted using his thunder force to absorb them. But the result was not as he had expected. Those lightning strands and his own thunder force repelled each other much harder than he had ever imagined, and they began to go berserk inside his body. "How is it, Long Chen?" Tang Wan'er cried out when she saw Long Chen was completely motionless atop the kite. "I'm fine. Just maintain this height and let me get used to it," shouted back Long Chen. He then continued attempting to refine the power of the lightning, but no matter how he tried, he was unable to refine it at all. It was as if Long Chen's original thunder force was water while this natural thunder force was oil. The two of them refused to mix. He tried a dozen times without succeeding. Then, gritting his teeth, he directly gave up on his original thunder force and began to try connecting to the natural thunder force. That thunder force had no will, but it was exceptionally berserk like lava. As Long Chen attempted to refine it, it wildly attacked Long Chen's spirit. Damn this thing! He had tried refining it and had failed. Now he tried connecting to it and failed. Long Chen now directly used the most berserk method, using his spiritual strength to wildly attack that thunder force. Long Chen's thunder force crazily attacked those strands of natural thunder force. Although that natural thunder force resisted crazily, it had no further source of power and was unable to continue fighting against Long Chen's spiritual strength that continuously surged out. Finally, Long Chen suppressed its berserk nature. After subduing it, he could control it as well as his old thunder force. He used this new natural thunder force to refine the thunder force he had originally gotten from Lei Qiansheng. What pleasantly surprised Long Chen was that while previously his thunder force had been like a sheep trying to devour a wolf, it had completely reversed now, and this new thunder force easily devoured his old thunder force, refining it anew. This new thunder force rushed around Long Chen's body. Although it wasn't his core thunder force, it was like a tamed magical beast inside him that he could control as he wished. This new discovery delighted him, and he shouted to Tang Wan, "Let's start. Let the lightning be a bit more intense." Chapter 214 Crazy Method. Tang Wan'er was relieved to see that Long Chen was all right and slowly released some of the string, letting the kite rise step by step. By the time the huge kite was almost 1,000 meters into the air, it was nothing more than a palm-sized dot in the air. Tang Wan'er's heart was pounding. If Long Chen fell from that height onto the rock mountain, even his powerful physical body would be crushed flat. Suddenly a bolt of lightning struck Long Chen directly again. A powerful thunder force also flowed down the string. She immediately felt her body go numb. Having lost sensation of her hand for a moment, the string began to quickly fly out, frightening her out of her mind. She quickly grabbed it again. Even from so far away, the thunder force was still so strong. She was horrified when she thought about how powerful it must be at Long Chen's position. "Long Chen, are you all right?" she shouted. That was because she couldn't see how he was at the top of the kite. Still fine. Long Chen's body was quivering. That wasn't from fear, but from the thunder force that was wildly wreaking havoc in his body. He was shaking as if he was having a seizure. This time the thunder force was even more berserk. If it had been someone else, they would have directly been charred to ashes. He was glad he had gathered those magical beast bones and hides for this kite. The thunder force wouldn't affect them much, and so he would be able to stay up here for longer without any worries. Long Chen stayed up there for a quarter hour before finally refining that thunder force, increasing the amount of thunder force in his body. "Bring me up a bit higher." As the kite gradually grew higher, Long Chen's chance of being struck increased. On average, it was around an incense stick's amount of time between lightning strikes. The terrain was extremely special here. Black thunderclouds gathered here and would never scatter. Whenever the thunder force accumulated to a certain level, it would crash down upon the ground. That was why the mountain peak was completely bare. It had already been struck by lightning countless times. Since Long Chen was intentionally drawing the lightning towards him, it was naturally easy for him to be struck. On the ground, Tang Wan'er saw Long Chen be struck several times. His hair stood on end like a hedgehog, but he wasn't suffering any injuries. Only then did she relax slightly. Inside she sighed that Long Chen really was a monster, but he was also a madman. He could think of all sorts of crazy ideas. Even crazier was that he would actually follow through on those crazy ideas. She had already smartly figured out how to avoid being impacted by the lightning herself. The instant the light appeared over Long Chen's head, she would let go of the string. Once that lightning fell, she could grab it again less than couple seconds later. Natural thunder force came quickly, but it also went quickly. This way Tang Wan'er didn't need to suffer being impacted by the thunder force as well. Although the thunder force that was transmitted down was much weaker, it would have still been something extremely difficult for her to bear with her weaker body. Now that she had figured out the rhythm, it was much easier for her to avoid the lightning strikes. Up in the air, Long Chen was constantly absorbing thunder force. He could sense his body gradually growing stronger due to the thunder force tempering. Each cell in his body was growing stronger. The slight impurities in his body were being forced out by the power of the thunder force. Thunder force can actually strengthen the physical body? That discovery delighted Long Chen. Then wouldn't he gradually be able to make his own body stronger and stronger? His original goal had only been to increase the lightning resistance of his body for the future heavenly punishment. But he hadn't expected to make other gains as well. At the same time, he also noticed that the golden color in his blood was gradually growing under the thunder force strengthening. That particular discovery had almost made him jump up in joy. He had accidentally discovered a new way to increase his cultivation base. The golden particles had appeared in his blood once he had advanced to the 10th heaven stage of blood condensation. Those golden particles were extremely sparse, but Long Chen could sense that those particles contained a terrifying energy. Now with the assistance of the thunder force, those golden particles were gradually increasing. Long Chen's heart jumped with joy. Now he could quickly cultivate even without absorbing magical beast essence blood. Third-rank magical beast essence blood was now already almost useless to Long Chen. His cultivation speed with it was minuscule. Now seeing the golden particles in his sand increase, Long Chen suddenly stood up and grandly roared, "Give me more lightning dash!" Rumble! Suddenly the huge black clouds in the sky condensed into a whirlpool and dozens of thunderbolts crashed down on Long Chen. "Careful, Long Chen!" Tang Wan'er turned pale. At some point Long Chen had already floated up right next to the thunderclouds. Long Chen's appearance immediately attracted all the surrounding thunder force. Boom! Long Chen's kite turned to ashes, while Tang Wan'er was sent flying by the terrifying thunder force. Long Chen! Tang Wan'er let out a startled cry, looking up into the sky fearfully. The kite had already been turned to ashes, and Long Chen was tumbling down like a falling star. To fall from over 3,000 meters onto hard rock, Long Chen would definitely die. Tang Wan'er frantically rushed over, wanting to save him. But when Long Chen was a couple hundred meters from the ground, he suddenly took out a large umbrella. Opening the umbrella, Long Chen's descent immediately slowed, but the huge force caused the umbrella to directly collapse. Once more falling, when he reached a height of 30 meters, he took out another umbrella, slowing down again. So in the end, his impact on the ground was the same as if he had only fallen from less than 20 meters. Tang Wan'er was startled and relieved. She really hadn't thought Long Chen would be that smart and had arranged backup plans. But to fall from that height could definitely still cause some injury, so she hastily ran over to support him. Tang Wan'er had only just touched him when she immediately received an attack from a terrifying thunder force. Only then did she realize with horror that Long Chen was covered in thunder force. His skin had turned black like coal, and occasionally explosive arcs of electricity would jump out. This scoundrel, is he crazy? Tang Wana might not be exactly clear on what Long Chen was doing, but as a monster class expert, she could sense a terrifying, berserk thunder force within his body. She could tell that he was tightly locking that thunder force in his body. He was clearly struggling fiercely with it just to keep it in his body. He was actually using his body as a prison to keep the thunder force in. That was too crazy. She also immediately realized when Long Chen had been struck by those dozens of thunderbolts, he hadn't resisted them at all, intentionally drawing them into his body. Just thinking about that gave her shivers. Just what kind of monster was Long Chen? That thunder force that was running rampant throughout his body would be able to turn a tendon transformation expert to ashes. But Long Chen actually wanted to trap and raise it within his body. Although Long Chen was completely motionless on the ground, Tang Wana wasn't too worried yet. Long Chen's spiritual strength was still fiercely attempting to subdue the thunder force in his body. There were a couple times when that thunder force almost erupted like a volcano, only to be forced back by Long Chen. Those times gave her quite a worry. If he wasn't able to force back that eruption, Long Chen wouldn't even have a corpse left. He was practically gambling with his life. And yet she also didn't dare go help him. There was no way she could do anything for him, and in fact, she might end up disturbing him. She could only watch helplessly. Madman, he's definitely a madman. Tang Wana angrily repeated that as the thunder force charred his body black. She was both angry and distressed. She wondered about his past and sighed. She really couldn't imagine just what Long Chen had endured for him to cultivate with his life on the line like this. He was clearly already strong enough. With a blood condensation cultivation base, he was able to fight across realms, even able to defeat the strongest one amongst them, Gu Yang. What more did he want? Suddenly Long Chen vomited out blood. The thunder force in his body had become even more berserk, actually injuring him. Long Chen, just give it up. Tang Wana couldn't stop herself. As long as he released the thunder force out of his body, he would be completely fine. Long Chen didn't reply, only shaking his head, his eyes still tightly closed. It had been hard enough to capture so many fat pigs. If he didn't properly slaughter them, that really would be unworthy of the kite he had painstakingly built. But this time there really were too many fat pigs. He couldn't handle them one by one like he had before. Being swarmed by so many really was taxing for him. There were several times Long Chen had thought about giving up, but he was still unwilling. How could he allow this pork to just fly away? That definitely wasn't his style. But he also couldn't refine them all at once because this new thunder force had already surpassed the thunder force in his body. A single wolf couldn't possibly eat a dozen pigs at once. That was especially the case since these pigs also knew how to bite back. So all Long Chen could do was use his spiritual strength to suppress the crazy thunder force. But even he wasn't sure he would be able to suppress this much thunder force. His powerful spiritual strength surged out of him, suppressing the thunder force to its best ability. The two began a fierce struggle inside his body. This method really was crazy. But perhaps the only person in the world who had a chance of pulling of this crazy idea was Long Chen. It was probably impossible to find another person in this world with such a powerful physical body and such an abnormal soul. Usually those who had powerful souls had weaker bodies like Tang Wana. As for those who possessed powerful physical bodies, their spiritual strength would be lacking greatly. Gu Yang was an excellent example of that. Other than for using a spatial ring, his spiritual strength was incapable of accomplishing anything else. But Long Chen had both qualities. If he still didn't test it out a bit, he really wouldn't be Long Chen. In order to get stronger, he would be willing to do anything. Otherwise, how could he find out his past? How would he get justice? How would he get revenge? Be suppressed. Long Chen roared inside. His last spiritual strength suppressed the thunder force with a force of 100,000 pounds of pressure. Chapter 2:15 Embryonic Thunder Force Rune. Tang Wana worriedly watched Long Chen. That thunder force had almost erupted out several times, causing her heart to pound. But as time passed, the thunder force rebellious will was gradually eroded by Long Chen's spiritual strength. Unfortunately, Long Chen wasn't much better off. Suppressing that much thunder force at the same time exhausted him to death. After a prolonged battle, the deadlock was finally broken. Long Chen's advantage was that his spiritual strength slowly recovered with time. But this thunder force was without any further reinforcement. After 3 whole days, Long Chen finally taught Tang Wana a lesson: perseverance always wins. In those 3 days, Long Chen had finally eroded the berserk will within the thunder force so that it no longer resisted him. But Long Chen was already completely exhausted and didn't have the energy to refine it at this time. He rested a whole day before recovering and beginning to refine the thunder force. Because there was no further resistance, it was like a group of wolves had transformed into sheep. Now Long Chen used his previous thunder force to easily devour this new thunder force, increasing his own thunder force. Long Chen immediately gained control of over 10 times his previous thunder force. He was also pleasantly surprised to see that the golden particles in his blood had increased. There were also faint runes that had appeared in his blood. Those runes were extremely minute and very weak, but they were definitely a kind of rune. Connecting to those runes in his blood, his face immediately erupted into ecstasy. What happened? When Tang Wana saw Long Chen finally open his eyes, she was given a fright. Haha, I've really struck gold. Long Chen hugged Tang Wana and crazily spun around, unable to control his own excitement. Aya, scoundrel, it hurts. Let me go. Tang Wana's heart pounded as she was hugged by Long Chen. Her red face almost seemed like blood would drip out of it. She felt warmth, bashful, as well as a bit angry. Long Chen let her go and awkwardly apologized. Sorry, I forgot myself. Tang Wana's face was completely red and she didn't dare look at him. It wasn't as if she could say it was all right, as wouldn't that encourage him to do that a second time. What's going on? Why are you so excited? Tang Wana forced herself to be calm, pretending to be tranquil. Hee, let me show you something good. Buzz. Long Chen opened his hand and a spear of thunder force appeared. Lightning covered it along with faint runes, and it looked just like a real, solid spear. Rumbling sound came from the spear and a terrifying destructive will accompanied it, causing Tang Wana to fearfully take a step back. Her shy expression became shock as she stared at that thunder force spear in Long Chen's hand. This thunder force is... Long Chen laughed. Yes, this is the natural thunder force I snatched. This time I really did profit. I don't know why, but the thunder force rune automatically condenses within my blood now. In the future I'll have my own thunder force seed, ha! Long Chen, you really are amazing. Tang Wana was truly in awe of him. She actually took the initiative to hug Long Chen in her excitement. It hurts. Let me go. Long Chen imitated Tang Wana's previous tone and expression. Scoundrel, you really don't know how to talk properly. Tang Wana was immediately enraged and let go Long Chen. She gave him a kick. Long Chen laughed and dodged her kick. It was just a joke, don't be so angry. This thunder force will be one of my killing moves in the future. His excitement had still not faded. Now that he could control his own thunder force, he could use thunder force to temper his body. However, at this time the runes in his body were still in an embryonic state. If he wanted it to progress faster, he would need to snatch even more thunder force. In this manner, he would have much greater guarantee against future heavenly punishments. Furthermore, his thunder force would even be able to increase his own cultivation base and would be a powerful attacking force. It really like 3 birds with 1 stone. With the presence of those runes in his blood, it meant he could transform his own spiritual chi into thunder force. So now Long Chen had his flame blade, a lightning blade, split the heavens, and his Feng Fu battle armor as powerful attacks. The last 2 were especially shocking, but they also were greatly exhausting. His Feng Fu star was not really enough. Now he understood why the 9-star hegemon body art involved forming 9 stars. That was because without such an ample reserve of energy, it was impossible to keep up with that terrifying consumption rate. Let's go do some missions and get some points, said Long Chen. Now they had nothing more to do. It would be best for him to do some missions and gather enough points for the Alioth pill's ingredients as soon as possible. He hoped to form the 2nd star as soon as possible. Otherwise, if he could be temporarily powerful with his trump cards but had no way to maintain it, it would be completely useless. So at this time he needed to increase his ability to fight longer. If I waited for you to think of such a thing, it really would have been late. I've long since made the arrangements, snorted Tang Wana, wrinkling her nose at him. She had already sent people to complete the monastery's missions while he had been in his unconscious state. Although the Heaven-Earth faction was ranked number 1 this time, there was no way they could monopolize every single mission. They took around 20% of the missions. But to take 1/5 of the missions amongst 17 factions was definitely a large proportion. Furthermore, there were only a dozen 2nd-level missions available. The rest were all just 3rd-level or even 4th-level missions. No matter what, the monastery wouldn't allow a single faction to immediately swallow all the points available. After all, everyone needed to struggle and compete with each other. There had to be at least something left for the bottom-ranking factions. Tang Wana had told him that if the 1st-rank faction completed all the missions they could, they would bring in 270,000 points. Even Long Chen had been startled then. Those points were essentially free since the missions weren't at all difficult. They were more than capable of completing them all. Missions didn't need that many people to accomplish, and so Tang Wana had already arranged everything. Wana, I feel like Song Mingyuan, Li Qi, and Luo Tsang was trustworthy people. I'm thinking of having them join us, said Long Chen. Even after Long Chen had been exiled, the 3 of them had never abandoned them, even despite ranking at the bottom because of it. That was enough to win over Long Chen's trust. I don't really get what you mean, said Tang Wan. Weren't they all already allied? I mean we should place everyone's earning together. We'll raise all our power equally, proposed Long Chen. Tang Wana was startled. That's a bit too sloppy. There's no problem with Sister Jiqiu's side, but if all 5 of our factions formed a total alliance like that, something bad can happen all too easily. The more people there were, the more difficult it would be to stay one family. If one side became dissatisfied, if there was criticism or discrimination, or any injustices at all could have a huge impact. If there was even the slightest mistake, they would collapse from the inside out. There was too high of a chance of their alliance crumbling if they did that. Tang Wana felt that the benefits did not warrant the risk. I understand what you're thinking, but I believe with their abilities, they are able to control their subordinates. Conflict will only arise because of irreconcilable differences of opinions. But if everyone saw their power crazily rise every day, what differences would ever occur? Smiled Long Chen. What do you mean? I have the ability to let everyone's cultivation bases to crazily soar. As long as they trust me and let me use their points, I can let their faction grow to an unprecedented power level, confidently said Long Chen. Tang Wana immediately realized Long Chen was going to rely on his amazing alchemy skills to increase everyone's power. Although the monastery's medicinal pills were very expensive, the medicinal ingredients themselves were much cheaper. With Long Chen's abnormal refining success rate, they would be able to greatly save everyone's points. Furthermore, I know the pill formulas for every single medicinal pill in the monastery, as well as pill formulas they don't even know. Long Chen smiled. Within his pill god memories were countless pill formulas. As long as he had enough medicinal ingredients, what medicinal pill couldn't he refine? With enough medicinal ingredients, increasing everyone's cultivation bases was simple. Song Minjiwang and them had stood by the Heaven-Earth faction even in such difficult times. That was enough to show they were straightforward and upright people. Long Chen didn't like to owe anyone, and since they considered him their brother, he would definitely not disappoint their trust. Since everyone had decided to trust their backs to each other, They should trust each other completely through thick and thin. Okay, you can decide that. There's no problem on Sister Jichio's side, but you'll have to go to Song Mingyuan and them to propose this. Tang Wan'er nodded. Since Long Chen had already decided, she wouldn't oppose him. She actually greatly admired this kind of action by Long Chen. Men should be like that, straightforward and upright, knowing when to repay kindness and enmity. Compared to Long Chen, the others like Gu Yang, Lei Qiansheng, and Qi Xen were absolute trash. Such fellows didn't even deserve to be called men. How's your condition? Do you need to rest more? Tang Wan'er worriedly asked when she saw how exhausted he was. It's nothing big. Let's go, little Snow should have returned. I've already opened a spiritual space, and so I can properly bring him with me. Furthermore, we'll have another powerful helper in the next competition. I want to see if that baldy Gu Yang can still be so arrogant then, said Long Chen with high spirits. Tang Wan'er laughed. Why do you sound so excited? Lei Qiansheng and Qi Xen were beaten into dogs by you, and you even defeated Gu Yang. Are you still not satisfied? Teach, I'm not that nice. They made you cry from grief and broke Guoran's bones. How could I let it go like that? I have never claimed to be some good person. If someone hurts my friends, I will make them pay such a bitter price that anyone watching won't dare get any further ideas, said Long Chen. Tang Wan'er's heart warmed when she heard that. She had definitely been part of the reason why he had been exiled. The feeling of being protected was definitely a good one. Let's go back. Long Chen walked back in the direction of the monastery. He couldn't absorb more thunder force without some rest first. Tang Wan'er quickly followed after him, curiously asking, Long Chen, can you tell me about what happened to you during your exile? There's nothing good to tell. No, you definitely have to tell me. It was nothing. Every day it was just hunting, eating meat, and drinking blood. It was really bloody, and there was nothing of interest. Let's just hurry up and not let little Snow wait. Long Chen didn't want to think about those things, and he also didn't feel like there was anything to talk about. Just like that, he brought Tang Wan'er away from this mountain peak. Chapter 216 Overflowing Killing Intent. When Long Chen returned to the place he had marked, his expression changed. He rushed forward and saw that it was a complete mess. An area of hundreds of meters had been completely leveled. Ditches and scars were dug into the ground. Some of the ditches were even a mile long. There was definitely a large battle here. Tang Wan'er was startled as she examined this land. Long Chen's expression sunk. It seems little Snow was attacked by people. He rubbed a part of the ground that was dark red. Clearly that place had been corroded by blood. Long Chen could smell little Snow's scent from that blood. From these scars, it seems that some were made by sword chi and not a magical beast. But who would attack little Snow? Puzzled Tang Wan'er. This place wasn't even technically in the monastery's land, and so none of the monastery's experts would come here. And if it wasn't the monastery's people, then it had to be outsiders. But there were no settlements within tens of thousands of miles of the Xiantian monastery. There wouldn't be any foreign experts coming here. Furthermore, the Scarlet Flame Snow Wolf was an overlord amongst third-rank magical beasts. Although Little Snow was only at the early third rank, an ordinary tendon transformation expert wouldn't dare rashly attack him. Anyone who dared to attack Little Snow had to at least be at the mid-tendon transformation realm. Long Chen darkly walked forward a couple steps and saw more blood as well as a couple footprints. It wasn't one person who attacked Little Snow, but three. Long Chen clenched his teeth looking at those footprints. He was now incredibly worried. Little Snow wouldn't take the initiative to attack others, so most likely he had now fallen into danger. Suddenly Long Chen rushed forward a mile and saw a huge hole here. Within the hole were many marks of wolf claws. Little Snow was captured here. They most likely used a net to hobble him here. Long Chen took a deep breath, trying to maintain his cool calm. But he was simply unable to do that. His voice began to tremble and his killing intent involuntarily began to rise. Tang Wan'er comforted, they caught Little Snow alive, meaning Little Snow's life won't be in danger for now. They probably want Little Snow as a mount, so we still have time. Long Chen nodded and carefully examined the markings. This occurred 2 days ago. Let's search around and see if we can find any more clues. Tang Wanner nodded. The two of them split up to search for any clues left behind. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the two of them had already searched an area of 5 miles. Tang Wanner shook her head, as she had found nothing. After those people had captured Little Snow, they had used some sort of unknown tool to bring him away. There were no trails left behind. Did you find anything? Asked Tang Wanner. Long Chen beckoned with his hand, showing her a piece of clothing. It was done by people from the monastery. This is from a law enforcer. Tang Wanner was startled. Carefully examining that cloth, she saw it was the torn cuff of a sleeve which still had part of the law enforcement's insignia. Let's go. I want to see just who had the nerve to do this. Killing intense sword from Long Chen. This time he was truly infuriated. For them to scheme against Little Snow made him angrier than being stabbed himself. Once he returned to the monastery, he directly returned to his immortal cave and summoned all the disciples who were cultivating. He asked them all about what they had heard or seen. Quite a few of them had left the monastery in the past few days and might have seen some odd movements. He also told Yu Zhiqiu, Song Mingyuan, Li Qi, and Luo Cang to tell their people to investigate. Perhaps their disciples who were outside completing missions might have seen something. That was especially true of those disciples who were completing patrol missions on the borders of the monastery. Ever since Little Snow had been the size of a palm, he had always been with him. He was like his own child, and he was unable to accept anything happening to him. Senior brother Long Chen, there's someone outside looking for you. Suddenly a disciple ran over frantically. Long Chen was delighted, thinking it was news of Little Snow. He was about to say something when a familiar voice rang out. Why are you guys so annoying? I want to see my brother Long, so don't block me. Although that person wasn't purposely shouting, his voice was like a loud bell, shaking people's eardrums. Hearing that familiar voice, Long Chen was overjoyed and hastily rushed out his immortal cave. He saw over a dozen disciples attempting to block one person. That person was already over 3 meters tall and huge muscles bulged all over his body, making him seem like an iron tower. At the same time, he was also like a volcano, filled with an explosive strength. On his back was spiked club. The handle part of it was as thick as a person's thigh while the head was the same width as a barrel. Standing there, he looked like some terrible fiend with his incredible imposingness. Although there were over a dozen disciples facing him, their faces were all pale with terror. Tang Wanner was also frightened. This was the first time she had ever seen such a terrifying-looking person. He was at least a head taller than even Lei Qianshang, his arms as thick as barrels. His chi surged out shockingly, seeming like some kind of monstrous beast. Wild. Long Chen looked at that giant with disbelief. He and Wild had been separated for so long now. Long Chen's call immediately caused Wild to turn to see him. Wild roared happily and charged over at him. This time everyone really was scared witless, thinking Long Chen might be crushed. But Long Chen was also wild with joy as he rushed over to Wild as well. The two of them tightly embraced. Wild even began to cry. Brother Long, I've finally found you again. Good brother, don't cry. Didn't we already say that no matter how much blood we bleed, we'll never cry? Although that was what he said, Long Chen was also almost choked with tears. Wild was like his real brother. Within the monastery where he had no family at all, finding Wild was even more emotional. Wild hastily wiped away his tears and simple-mindedly said, "Okay, Wild will listen to you." Even after being separated for several months, Wild was still as simple and straightforward as ever. Long Chen patted him on his thick arm a couple times with some shock. The current Wild had thickened everywhere. His muscles almost looked like they might burst. His chi and blood looked like they might be even more terrifying than a third-rank magical beast. Don't be worried, everyone. Wild is my brother. Everyone can go back to what you were doing. Long Chen brought Wild back to his immortal cave. He introduced Wild to Tang Wanner and Qin Yu. The two of them were extremely out of sorts. Wild looked too terrifying, like a giant giving off a powerful pressure. They felt as if just a wave of his hand would crush them. But then seeing how simple and honest he was, they gradually calmed down. "How have you been recently, Wild?" asked Long Chen. When he had arrived at the monastery, Long Chen had asked Tu Feng about Wild. At that time, Tu Feng had only said Wild had gone out with someone else. But he had always refused to tell him where he had gone. "I'm really good. Following that old man, each day I can eat till I'm very full." Wild scratched his head very contentedly. "Who is that old man?" asked Long Chen. I think I remember he told me he was called something, but I don't remember. He just told me to call him master." Wild shook his head. "You've formally gotten a master?" Long Chen was happy for him. If an elder was his master, that would definitely be a blessing for Wild. With the special nurturing of a powerful elder, it was no wonder he was so strong now. It really was a case of a fool's luck. Tang Wan'er and Qin Yu were both startled. The monastery's rules were strict, and an ordinary elder was not allowed to accept disciples. That would break the impartiality of the disciples' competition. If an elder wanted to accept a disciple, it required the approval of the sect leader. Those that had been accepted by an elder were not allowed to participate in the competitions and would be supported solely by that elder. But this fellow didn't even remember what his master's name was. He really was a marvel. Both Tang Wan'er and Qin Yu's expressions became a bit strange. "Yup, the old man said he's accepted me formally as my master and that he'll never let me go hungry again. He really does treat me well. Each day I get to eat till I'm super full." Wild nodded. Tang Wan'er couldn't hold back from cutting in. "Are your dreams that simple? Just eating till you're full is enough?" "Of course. I was always afraid of starving when I was younger. If it hadn't been for Brother Long taking me in back then, I would have starved to death. As long I have enough to eat now, I'm satisfied," Wild laughed naively. Long Chen smiled. Tang Wan'er was only so surprised because she had no idea just how much Wild could eat. "Let me examine your body." Long Chen placed his hand on Wild's shoulder, sending in his spiritual strength. He was pleasantly surprised to see that almost 30% of his cells had activated at this time. Furthermore, there were some odd things that had appeared in his blood now. Those things looked like very tiny tadpoles, but no two tadpoles were the same. It looked like a kind of rune. But those runes were alive within his blood, constantly swimming around. Long Chen sensed a terrifying pressure from those tadpole-shaped runes. It seemed like each rune possessed a power that could destroy the world. Although this was still just an embryonic form, it still possessed such power. It was just like a lion cub. It might appear like a cute puppy at the moment, but in the future it would grow into a terrifying lion. Furthermore, the pressure he sensed from the runes in Wild body was already so terrifying. When they matured, he would definitely be no lion, but a true monster. Long Chen shook. When Wild grew up, would he be the same as that ferocious beast? Long Chen would never be able to forget that dream he had had. In that battle, a single fist shattered the void and a single roar destroyed stars. That was an apocalyptic power. If that was true, that just how terrifying was Wild's origin. Long Chen continued asking Wild how he had been during the past few months. Wild said he would go hunting and eat meat with the old man every day. If he could beat the beast, then he would beat it, but if he couldn't beat it, the old man would help. Every day he would eat till he was full. "Wild, how much do you eat a day?" Tang Wan'er finally felt that something was off and asked this crucial question. "If it's third-rank magical beasts, and if they're a bit bigger, I eat 3 a day. If it's a fourth-rank magical beast, just 1 is enough," replied Wild. Both Tang Wan'er and Qin Yu covered their mouths in shock. He ate 3 third-rank magical beasts a day, and they actually had to have large bodies? And he was actually able to eat 4th-rank magical beasts? Just what level had his elder reached? "Senior Brother Long, we found news of Little Snow." Suddenly a disciple ran in and reported to Long Chen, panting for breath. Long Chen immediately stood up, his killing intent once more overflowing. Chapter 217 Furious Wild. Senior brother Long Chen. 3 days ago, one of senior brother Song Mingyuan's people was working when he saw 3 law enforcers carrying a large object back to the monastery, reported that disciple. Could he tell that it was Little Snow? Frantically asked Long Chen. He shook his head. That disciple said it was covered in layers of clothing and he was unable to see what was inside. But based on the shape, it was similar to the body of Little Snow that you described. Furthermore, that disciple said those 3 law enforcers were somewhat out of sorts. There were even bloodstains on them. They should have just experienced a great fight. Long Chen's heart pounded. Then that really was likely to be Little Snow. But he still didn't know just who had done it. The monastery had over 100 law enforcers covering a dozen areas. They weren't always in the same place. He would need to investigate this more. What happened to Little Snow? Asked Wild. He was captured by others. Long Chen ground his teeth. Who dared bully Little Snow? Wild will crush them with a single club. Wild was furious. At this time, Ling Hao walked in. Ling Hao was the only male amongst the Heaven-Earth faction's inner disciples, and his cultivation base was pretty good. Senior brother Long, a disciple requests to see you from outside. He says he had something important to report. Ling Hao saluted. Let him in, hastily said Long Chen. At this time, a somewhat thin man walked in. When Long Chen saw that man, he did feel he was a bit familiar, but he didn't recognize him. Zhao Qian greets senior brother Long Chen. He directly cupped his fist to him. Many thanks for senior brother Long Chen's life-saving help back then. Long Chen was confused for a moment, then he thought of it. You are? Yes, it's me. If it weren't for brother Long helping, Zhao Qian would already be buried with the fishes, gratefully said Zhao Qian. Long Chen finally remembered this person from back in the trial region. There had been a fierce river that had blocked their path. Yi Zhiqiu had used her ice energy to cross over gracefully like a fairy. One person had tried borrowing her leftover ice to cross as well, but that ice energy hadn't lasted for long before dropping him into the river, causing the tiger-mouth fishes to attack him. Back then Long Chen had thrown out a stick to pull him back, saving his life. Senior brother Long Chen, a couple days ago I joined Qi Xian's faction. I had to secretly come here, said Zhao Qian. When Long Chen had defeated Gu Yang, he had also beat Lei Qianshang and Qi Xian black and bruised. Later they were then almost beat to death by the crowd. After recovering, Qi Xian returned to his faction and his temper exploded on his people. That flag-bearer disciple was directly beaten unconscious by him. Qi Xian had then cursed everyone, and quite a few people had been expelled from his faction. Zhao Qian had borrowed that opportunity to join his faction. Senior brother Long Chen, I, Zhao Qian, owe you my life. My coming here is tantamount to betraying them, so I also won't return to Qi Xian's faction. I came here to tell you that 4 nights ago, Qi Xian got completely drunk and said he would take revenge on, letting you taste pain. Later I then heard the next day he personally went to find some law enforcers. I don't know whether that has anything to do with your mount, explained Zhao Qian. Everyone in the monastery already knew that amongst the new disciples, Long Chen was the only one with a 3rd-rank mount. Before the trial had even begun, Qi Xian had wanted to humiliate Long Chen, but had been defeated by Little Snow. And now Long Chen learned Qi Xian had raved about getting revenge and had gone to see the law enforcers. The very next day, Little Snow had disappeared. Everything pointed to Qi Xian. Senior brother Long Chen, I only know so much. Junior will take his leave now. Zhao Qian cupped his fists and prepared to leave. Don't go back. In the future, you'll be a member of our Heaven-Earth faction. Long Chen patted Zhao Qian's shoulder. Zhao Qian was startled, looking at him with disbelief. Senior brother Long Chen, didn't you say you hated traitors the most? First you must distinguish between right and wrong, remembering kindness and enmity. If you know you made a wrong choice, don't stupidly stay on that rotten path forever. You aren't a traitor. Ling Hao set Zhao Qian up. He'll be one of our brothers from now on. Long Chen turned to Ling Hao. Ling Hao nodded and also patted Zhao Qian's shoulder, smiling. "Brother, let's go. I'll go get you a dwelling." Zhao Qian was incredibly moved, never imagining Long Chen would take him in. Warm tears appeared in his eyes. Ling Hao cut him off. "Come on, don't be like a woman." But as soon as he said that, his expression changed. He turned to see Tang Wan'er and Qin Yu staring at him expressionlessly. Ling Hao knew he had misspoke. Sweat rolled down his face, but he also had no explanation. He hastily pulled Zhao Qian out. "Long Chen, what should we do?" asked Tang Wan'er. "What possible choices are there? If they want to scheme against me, that's fine, but if they dare scheme against my friends, I definitely won't let them off." Long Chen's gaze was as sharp as sword. "But we have no proof." Tang Wan'er knew they couldn't go to the upper levels of the monastery with just Zhao Qian's little testimony and some coincidences. "Looking for proof isn't my style. Let's go visit that mountain." Long Chen's expression was icily sinister. When Tang Wan'er and Qin Yu heard him say that, their scalps turned numb. "Who dares bully little Snow? Brother Long, we'll definitely beat the crap out of them." Wild followed Long Chen outside. Tang Wan'er and Qin Yu hastily chased after them. Tang Wan'er pulled on Long Chen. "Should we gather our people?" She had an understanding of Long Chen after all this time. Now, Long Chen's fury was practically steaming out of his head. Something major was very likely to happen. "You go and gather everyone. Wait for me in the Xintian Plaza. I'm going to visit that mountain with Wild," nodded Long Chen. He then brought Wild down the mountain. Tang Wan'er and Qin Yu glanced at each other, both seeing the other's worry and helplessness. Long Chen was one of those people who would rather die than surrender or compromise. And they had long since heard that the emotional connection between him and Little Snow was incomparably profound. Little Snow had now been captured, and that unconcealable killing intent soaring off Long Chen was already proof enough to confirm Long Chen had reached his breaking point. "Something big is about to happen," sighed Qin Yu. But they both knew they couldn't stop it. They split up to alert Song Eminjiwan in them. If they were going to make a ruckus, they might as well make it a bit bigger. With many people supporting him, the worst that could happen was that he would be exiled again. But having returned once, they were confident he could do it again. When Song Mingyuan and them heard that it was actually Qi Exin pulling the strings, they were all infuriated. They wanted to charge over to help. But Tang Wan'er stopped them. Long Chen had told them to gather at the Xintian Plaza, so he must have some kind of plan. They could only suppress their fury and go wait for him. 4-5 great factions to gather in the Xintian Plaza. All the other disciples were alarmed. They had no idea what was going on. Why were the 5 factions releasing such a murderous intent? Those disciples that saw that scene all returned to report to their bosses. Even an idiot could realize something big was going on. There was no one who wasn't curious. After sending a report, everyone prepared to watch what was about to unfold. When Long Chen and Wild reached Qi Xian's faction, they were immediately blocked at the mountain path. But Long Chen seemed to not see those people in his way and just walked up normally. "Stop! Don't force us!" One of the disciples fiercely spoke out. But all of them were already terrified of Long Chen after that last faction competition. Unfortunately, as a member of this faction, they had no choice but to at least act their part. Following that person's shout, more and more disciples rushed over. Seeing Long Chen with that fiend-like Wild, sweat poured down their backs. Long Chen's sinister expression was completely terrifying. Even in the last fight, his expression had been completely calm. But now, that dense killing intent pouring out of him made them tremble. They felt as if a sharp blade was pressed right up against their throats. It was as if a single thought from Long Chen would be enough to kill them. Long Chen didn't pay the slightest bit of attention to these disciples. He and Wild continued forward, and those disciples immediately made a way for him. Wild icily glanced at them. The current Wild was not the same as he had been back in the capital. He was filled with a wild nature as if he were a monstrous beast. Then adding on his frightening stature, he really was an absolute freak. That massive spiked club also made it hard to breathe. Wild followed behind Long Chen. The disciples in front of them continuously retreated nervously. That continued all the way until they reached the immortal cave at the peak. All the factions' mountains were essentially the same structure. This was the residence of their core disciple. Chi Exen, get the fuck out. Long Chen's sudden cold shout shook the heavens, rumbling through the mountains. Countless echoes reflected off those stone walls. Get the fuck out. Fuck out. Fuck. Wave after wave of echoes rang throughout the mountains, like replies to his furious killing intent. Suddenly, 3 people charged out of the immortal cave. Gu Yang, Lei Qiansheng, and Qi Exen were all unexpectedly present. Qi Exen's expression changed when he saw Long Chen. He quickly suppressed a frantic expression. Long Chen, you really are too brazen. How dare you come to my territory and behave so rudely? But Long Chen could hear the trembling in his voice. That proved he was nervous. But within that nervousness, there was also a trace of excitement. All that proved that everything had been Qi Exen's contemptible scheme. Fucking die. Long Chen couldn't hold back anymore and roared. His bone blade appeared in his hand and he charged at Qi Exen. Gu Yang roared and the runes on his lit up, his battle power soaring to his peak instantly. Long Chen, this time I'll force you back. Gu Yang sent a punch straight at Long Chen. However, he had forgotten one thing. With his focus completely on Long Chen, he had completely ignored Wild. How dare you attack my brother Long? Go to hell. Space trembled, almost seeming as if it would explode, as a huge spiked club swung at Gu Yang. Chapter 218 I'll bring you to kill people. Space seemed to almost break apart as Wild's huge spiked club smashed at Gu Yang. Gu Yang hastily went to block. But what was shocking to everyone was that when that club smashed onto Gu Yang's 2 arms, a loud explosion rang out mixed with the sound of bones breaking. Gu Yang let out a miserable scream as he shot back like a cannonball, smashing into the immortal cave and causing half of it to collapse. These immortal caves were made of special rock and were incomparably hard. But even so, half of it had collapsed. The only person who wasn't shocked was Long Chen. He had examined Wild's physical body earlier and knew that his strength had already surpassed everyone's imaginations. Wild's strength had always been terrifying. But now that 30% of his cells had been activated and those strange runes had appeared in his blood, his strength had already reached a completely abnormal level. Then adding on his huge club, the fact he hadn't crushed Gu Yang to pulp already proved how powerful Gu Yang was. While everyone was still filled with shock, Long Chen's bone blade reached Qi Exen's body. Qi Exen frantically summoned his water shield to protect himself. But his water shield was like paper in front of Long Chen's bone blade and immediately collapsed. Long Chen's bone blade smashed into his stomach, and a huge force sent him flying. The sound of bones breaking rang out, and he vomited out blood. Qi Exen was horrified that his own cultivation base had been suppressed in front of Long Chen's terrifying killing intent. In front of that killing intent, his will was greatly affected, and he was unable to release even 80% of his strength. Lei Qiansheng was also completely horrified. The current Long Chen really was like a death god. He was so horrified that he couldn't even bring himself to think about resisting. But he instinctively released his own thunder force when he saw Qi Exen be so heavily injured in one blow. He slashed down on Long Chen with a lightning blade. Long Chen coldly snorted. Sticking his bone blade into the ground, his right hand formed a fist covered with thunder force. Bang! Lei Qiansheng's lightning blade burst apart when it collided with Long Chen's fist. The most shocking thing was after destroying that thunderblade, the power behind Long Chen's fist hadn't diminished in the slightest and it directly smashed into his stomach. With more sounds of bones breaking, Lei Qiansheng vomited out blood and looked at Long Chen with completely shock and horror. Impossible, absolutely impossible. How can you control such a terrifying thunder force? Lei Qiansheng miserably slammed into the wall of the immortal cave, vomiting out more blood. But it was like he couldn't even feel his own injuries as he stared at Long Chen. As a lightning cultivator, he naturally knew that Long Chen had used Thunder Force just now. All cultivators with attributes like lightning were all born with a natural bloodline. But Long Chen had no such bloodline inheritance. The most shocking thing to Lei Qianshang was that Long Chen's Thunder Force was even more powerful and destructive than his own. In front of that terrifying Thunder Force, his own Thunder Force was like a little puppy that had met a lion. It was completely unable to resist. He could accept not being a match for Long Chen. But he was unable to accept that Long Chen could control Thunder Force and that his Thunder Force was actually thousands of times stronger than his own. That was the greatest insult to him. Someone without any bloodline inheritance had somehow managed to control Thunder Force? That filled him with shock as well as a profound feeling of powerlessness. When he had been miserably defeated by Long Chen, his confidence had been given a great blow. But he still had his own pride. As the number one junior generation of his family, he believed that as long as he could activate his ancestral mark and use his powerful Thunder Force, he would be able to eventually defeat Long Chen one day. But now Long Chen had displayed such terrifying Thunder Force of his own that had immediately turned any of his hopes to ashes. In front of that terrifying Thunder Force, his own power was far from lacking enough to resist. He had no idea that Long Chen's Thunder Force had come from heaven and earth. It was the most violent and berserk Thunder Force, and in terms of quality, it possessed a definite superiority over Lei Qianshang's Thunder Force. Long Chen had used his full strength and effort to devour that natural Thunder Force. And back then, that natural Thunder Force had swallowed the Thunder Force left behind by Lei Qianshang in his body in just one gulp. It was obvious that the two were not even in the same class. Those surrounding disciples were completely dumbfounded. 3 core disciples had all been defeated in just one move. And amongst them was even Gu Yang. Right now, Gu Yang's arms had already become deformed. But it went without saying that his body was still powerful. Even after smashing into the immortal cave and causing half of it to collapse, he had yet to faint and was staring at Wild with shock. Lei Qianshang was also leaning against the wall, his face white as paper. He looked expressionlessly up at the sky, not knowing what to think. Lei Qianshang, you might have a violent nature and be extremely arrogant, but your inferior, corrupt side still isn't that bad. Today, I'll let you off once. As for what choice you make in the future, that will be up to you. Long Chen didn't actually feel that much hate for Lei Qianshang. In his eyes, Lei Qianshang was just an arrogant child. He still didn't have much understanding over right and wrong. The reason Lei Qianshang had done all this was mostly at the urging of Qi Exing. And so, Long Chen decided to let him off this time, hoping he would be smarter than before. Although they had fought before, Long Chen had also gained a benefit from that. If it hadn't been for Lei Qianshang's Thunder Force seed, he still wouldn't be able to control his own Thunder Force. And without that Thunder Force, he wouldn't have been able to scheme against Gui Sha and would have definitely died in that cave. If it hadn't been for Lei Qianshang's Thunder Force as a foundation, he also wouldn't have been able to control his current natural Thunder Force. Although he knew Lei Qianshang had originally had some malicious intentions against him, Long Chen had definitely benefited from it in the end. As someone who remembered favors, he gave Lei Qianshang one chance. As for what he would choose, it would be up to him. Of the 3 attacks launched against the 3 of them, the attack against Qi Exing had been the lightest. However, he was the most heavily injured of the 3. That was because he didn't possess such a powerful physical body as the other 2. Long Chen's bone blade had smashed his bones to pieces, and he felt as if his body was about to completely collapse. Even his aura was scattered, unable to recondense. Placing his bone blade on his shoulder, Long Chen slowly walked over to Qi Exing. Tell me where little Snow was taken. Qi Exing had been gasping for breath, but when he heard Long Chen's question, he began to crazily laugh. Haha, so you already knew? Hee hee, unfortunately I won't tell you, so what are you going to do? If you want to know, kneel down and beg me. Qi Exing laughed just like a madman. His eyes were completely crazy and his expression was extremely sinister. He looked just like a wounded beast. Long Chen grabbed Qi Exing's collar and threw him outside. Chi Xen muffled a shout. Being so injured that toss caused his bones to shift, an unbearable pain. But he was also a vicious person. Even though the pain made him sweat, he still wouldn't relent. He sneered, "I know who has your wolf. If you go now, maybe you'll be able to see it. But if you're too late, all you'll be able to see is wolf meat. Haha, do you want to know its whereabouts? Then kneel down and beg me." Chi Xian's crazy laugh caused everyone to shiver. This Chi Xen really was a madman. To provoke Long Chen like this, wasn't he just begging to die? Those underlings of his were all terrified. This was the first time they saw how terrifying a madman could be. Normally when they followed beside Chi Xen, he was always so intellectual and resourceful. But ever since he had met Long Chen, he had gradually been left behind. Jealousy gave birth to hate, and he lost all his smarts. Ever since the first moment he had plotted to plant traitors in Long Chen's faction, a sinister seed had been buried in his heart. That seed was nourished by his jealousy and hatred, crazily growing until Chi Xian's heart had become completely twisted. From the two of their words, everyone had already realized what was going on. Chi Xen had once more plotted against Long Chen behind his back. Not only were people terrified, but they also began to think about leaving him. If they followed such a madman, they might also end up becoming like him. "I'll smash you to death." Wild was completely infuriated and raised his wolf-tooth club. Having fought against magical beasts all day every day, he had already long since forgotten how weak the human body was. If his club fell, Chi Xen would be turned to paste. Long Chen hastily stopped him. "Don't kill him for now. I'll listen to you, Brother Long. I wasn't going to kill him, just give him a bit of pain so he'd tell us the truth," explained Wild. Everyone else rolled their eyes. That club of his had already beaten someone like Gu Yang into such a state. If Chi Xen was hit, he would never feel that pain. "Leave this to me." Long Chen also felt a bit helpless. Wild's strength had grown, but his intelligence had not matured at all, it seemed. Looking at the crazy Chi Xen, Long Chen icily smiled. He walked up to him and stamped his foot 4 times. Crack, 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 crack. The sounds of bones breaking continuously rang out, causing people to shiver. Everyone felt sharp pains throughout their own bodies as if they were the one being crushed. Chi Xian immediately let out a miserable shriek. The places that Long Chen was stamping on were the places with the most concentrated nerves of pain. After stepping on those places, Long Chen took out a medicinal pill and forced it into Chi Xian's mouth. Chi Xen had no idea what it was and refused to swallow it. But after Long Chen gave him a slap in the face, all his teeth directly fell out. Holding open his mouth with one hand, all the spit he had been planning on spitting at him reversed and flowed back through his throat, bringing the medicinal pill with it. That medicinal pill wasn't a poison pill, but a spirit sensitivity pill. It could allow one to sense one's body better and absorb spiritual chi easier. Such a medicinal pill was thousands of times more frightening than some poison pill for Chi Xen. His senses were immediately improved by dozens of times, meaning he immediately felt dozens of times more pain. Even his eyes were popping out from the pain. But he was also unable to faint. That was a torment that was unexplainable with just words. "Let me go, I'll tell you." In just 3 breaths, Chi Xen was unable to endure. He surrendered in the face of that terrifying torment. Long Chen touched part of Chi Xian's body, temporarily blocking his sense of pain. "Speak. Your mount is in Wu Qi's hands." Long Chen's expression sunk and his killing intent soared. So his enemies had conspired together against him. "Let's go wild. Your brother will bring you to kill people." Chapter 219 Heaven-Earth Alliance gathers. Long Chen slapped Chi Xen unconscious with a single palm. With his bone blade on his shoulder, he then dragged Chi Xen by his hair down the mountain. Wild put his club back on his back and followed closely behind him. That huge club didn't seem heavy at all to him. Even once the two of them left, everyone was still speechless. Although they hadn't known for Long Chen, It seemed he had completely changed after returning from his exile. He was now like a rust-covered blade that had been unsheathed and polished, revealing its domineering sharp side. And those ruthless killing blows of his gave them such a sense of pressure that they were completely intimidated. They didn't even have a desire to fight back. One hand holding his bone blade, one hand dragging the unconscious Qi Exin, Long Chen's domineering image would forever be imprinted in their memories. Today, Qi Exin had invited Gu Yang and Lei Qianshang over to drink and had told the two of them what he had secretly done. From the patrolling disciples that had gone outside, he had learned that Little Snow's tracks had been found outside the monastery. But Little Snow only roamed around randomly and didn't fight with anyone. There was also no one brazen enough to go provoke Little Snow. Although they had advanced to the Tendon Transformation realm, Little Snow was a Scarlet Flame Snow Wolf, which an overlord amongst third-rank magical beasts. They were still not brave enough to go provoke him. He had learned about his existence while Long Chen had been exiled, but he hadn't done anything due to his own lack of strength. But this time Long Chen had returned and miserably defeated them, causing them to lose face. Qi Exin had immediately thought of Little Snow. They might not be able to defeat Little Snow, but others could. And so Qi Exin had thought about Wu Qi, who had fought with Long Chen. He had secretly told Wu Qi that Long Chen had a third-rank Scarlet Flame Snow Wolf as a mount that was staying on the outer border of the monastery. Wu Qi had immediately gathered two of his fellow senior disciples and gone to capture Little Snow. But he had clearly underestimated Little Snow, and the three of them had ended up a bit injured. But in any case, Qi Exin's sinister scheme had succeeded. He had been hoping to have Long Chen fight against Wu Qi when he went to get Little Snow. Qi Exin had heard that Long Chen had mobilized his entire alliance to go look for Little Snow today, and so he had invited the other two to watch him fight Wu Qi. But the three of them had only just gathered when Long Chen had come for him. And the result was that he didn't get to watch any good show and was instead beaten into his miserable state. The entire crowd was silent as they looked at each other. No one had any idea what they should do. Should they stay? Should they leave? Gu Yang slowly struggled up. It went without saying his body really was incredibly powerful for him to still be able to stand. "You guys go back for now," he told everyone. Only then did they return to their own immortal caves. Some people already began to gather their luggage. That was because they had realized they no longer wished to remain here. Their leader had been dragged away like a dead dog. The entire faction had lost all its face. Furthermore, they had all seen Qi Exin go crazy just now, causing them to shudder. If this continued, Long Chen and Qi Exin would forever be archenemies. The two of them had reached a state where neither would rest before the other was dead. But when comparing the two, everyone believed Long Chen would be the last one standing. What kind of joke had Qi Exin been trying to play? Long Chen was someone who had walked out of the graveyard of the exiled, the first one ever. He actually wanted to scheme against such a person? Wasn't that just asking for death? The current Long Chen was like a rising star. With the Heaven-Earth faction at the head of the five-faction Heaven-Earth alliance, not a single power could shake him. Even a blind person would have been able to see this situation. But Qi Exin was blinded by his own jealousy and had actually done something like this. There was no medicine in the world that could save him now. Of the three alliances, the Heaven-Earth alliance was clearly the strongest. The second strongest was them for now. But they were mortal enemies with Long Chen. With Long Chen present, they couldn't even think about rising again. And as for Guan Wenan's side, they had always maintained their neutrality. As long as they weren't idiots, there was no way they would help them out. Then the future was already completely clear. The Heaven-Earth Alliance's 5 factions would monopolize the top 5 ranks, and the rest would be left for Guan Wenan's alliance. As for them, well, as long as Long Chen was still alive, they shouldn't even have any hopes of growing. Since there was no way they could rise as they were, they might as well leave their faction. Even if they weren't disciples of a faction, they could still complete a couple missions. Although it wouldn't be as much as in a faction, it was at least better than being enemies with Long Chen. Being enemies with someone like Long Chen who was like a death god required more than just courage. Furthermore, they didn't even have any courage for that at all. Seeing everyone scatter, Gu Yang swallowed a medicinal pill, suppressing his wounds. He sighed. Just Long Chen was already so frightening, but now a monster even more frightening than Long Chen had appeared. They really were without the slightest bit of hope anymore. Gu Yang couldn't help feeling some regret. Back then, he really had been too arrogant to want to rely on his martial might to forcibly subdue Tang Wan'er and them. Originally, he had disdained doing something like putting traitors inside their factions, but after Qi Xian's urging, he had agreed to it in the end. But now because of Qi Xian, both sides had ended up becoming mortal enemies. Long Chen's sudden rise had caused their future prospects to become dark and dismal. "How are you?" Gu Yang pulled up Lei Qiansheng. "I've received a backlash from Thunder Force. I'll probably need to recuperate for quite a while," said Lei Qiansheng gravely. "How is that possible?" Gu Yang was shocked. He knew that while Lei Qiansheng wasn't as strong as him, he was definitely extremely formidable and tough. But most shocking of all was that he had been struck by a Thunder Force backlash. That was practically unbelievable, as he was a lightning cultivator. Lei Qiansheng bitterly smiled. "It's true. I don't know how Long Chen did it, but his Thunder Force is incomparably violent. That punch of his not only broke apart my lightning blade, but it caused my own Thunder Force in my body to go berserk, giving me a backlash." Long Chen's punch had broken Lei Qiansheng's arrogance. This was the first time he felt himself to be completely insignificant. "Since there's nothing else we can do, eat a medicinal pill to temporarily suppress your injuries. Let's go take a look. I think Long Chen won't leave this matter as is. He'll very likely go find those law enforcers for trouble." Gu Yang sighed. His arms were both broken. He should have directly gone to the healing hall, but he didn't want to miss seeing Long Chen's vengeance. He had sensed that Long Chen's killing intent this time was even more terrifying than last time. His intuition told him something major was about to happen. Lei Qiansheng nodded and consumed a medicinal pill, suppressing his injuries. Together, he and Gu Yang walked in the direction Long Chen had gone. Within the Xiantian Plaza, the Heaven-Earth Alliance's 5 factions had all gathered. Everyone's nerves were stretched taut, but there was also an indescribable excitement. Previously, Long Chen had led them to completely defeat Gu Yang's alliance, allowing them to release a great deal of their suppressed anger. That kind of comfortable feeling was something hard to put into words. Now they heard that Qi Xian had begun to plot behind their backs. Everyone was preparing themselves to fight with Qi Xian's side. 1. Did Long Chen really say not to go over there? Qi Xian has so many people under him. I'm worried Long Chen won't be able to handle them all, said Yujiqiu. After all, Long Chen was just one person. One person in front of 100 experts would definitely be at a disadvantage. Long Chen didn't go alone. He also has his brother. Tang Wan'er shook her head when she remembered Wild's giant figure. Although Wild didn't say much, that powerful pressure from his body was something that even made a powerful expert like her have difficulty breathing. It was obvious to her that Wild was a truly terrifying expert. With him by Long Chen's side, there was no need to worry. The only thing to worry about was whether or not Qi Xian had already been killed by Long Chen. That Qi Xian really is too trash. During the first time, he set up traitors, a completely shameless, despicable action. Then, even though his side was clearly stronger and already snatched all the flags, he actually broke the bones of all our disciples, completely insulting us. And now that Long Chen had returned, he paid them back tooth for tooth, eye for an eye, defeating them openly. But they actually then made such a plot. If I was Long Chen, I would definitely kill him with a single slap, angrily said Luo Tsang. When he finished speaking, he sensed the atmosphere had turned strange. He turned to see Song Mingyuan, Li Qi, Yujiqiu, and Tang Wan'er all staring at him. Did I say something wrong? Asked Luo Tsang at a loss. Song Mingyuan shook his head, worriedly saying, if even you want to kill Qi Xian like that, then I really don't know if Long Chen will be able to restrain himself. Only then did Luo Tsang realize the real problem. That's true. With Long Chen's temperament, he'll probably directly cut off his head. No, we have to hurry up and go stop him. Tang Wan'er shook her head. It's useless. Long Chen's already been gone for a quarter hour. Even if we went now, it'd be too late. They descended into silence. Last time, Long Chen had killed 5 outer disciples and been exiled to the rubble wasteland. If Long Chen really did kill a core disciple, then that would be much more troublesome. Everyone was filled with hatred. Chi Xen really was a piece of dog's shit. If you didn't step on him, then he'd constantly release his stink. But if you did step on him, crap would splatter across you. You couldn't avoid it, but you also couldn't kick it away. People are coming. Suddenly a disciple cried out. There were quite a few disciples rushing over to the Xintian Plaza. Amongst them were several core disciples. People saw Guan Wenan and his people. They clearly had been disturbed and come to watch the action. As time passed, more and more people gathered. The originally empty plaza became incredibly lively. There were also several people from Gu Yang's alliance who had come. Seeing that the Heaven-Earth Alliance had all gathered here, they were startled and immediately realized something was wrong. There were over 1,000 disciples standing in the distance, quietly guessing what was going on. All they knew was that the Heaven-Earth Alliance had gathered here. Those disciples had yet to hear of anything else. But it wasn't that difficult to guess why the Heaven-Earth Alliance had made such a large movement. As everyone was guessing, they saw 2 figures walking over. When everyone saw who they were, whether it was people from the Heaven-Earth Alliance or other factions, whether it was core disciples or outer disciples, they were all completely shocked and awed, their eyes almost popping out of their sockets. Chapter 220 Killing Intent Dashes Against the Heavens. When Long Chen appeared, everyone saw how dark his expression was. With his bone blade resting against his shoulder, his right hand was holding a person's hair, and he was dragging him like he was a dead dog. Behind Long Chen was the giant Wild, who had a 5-meter-long spiked club. The pressure he gave off was like he was some humongous divinity, making it hard for them to breathe. Most shocking of all was the person Long Chen was dragging was completely deformed. His limbs were bent and broken in many parts. Chi Xen, it's Chi Xen. Some people finally let out startled cries when they recognized that the person he was dragging was the core disciple Chi Xen. Seeing Chi Xen like this, people gasped. A core disciple, an existence that most of them could only look up to, had been turned into this state. Ignoring the bystanders, he walked in front of everyone and threw Chi Xen to the ground. He said to his people, "Today I have something to ask of my brothers. But this matter could affect your position within the monastery, and you might even be expelled. Gravely started Long Chen. Long Chen, there's no need to say so much. Since you've called us brothers, your issues are our issues. Tell us what you need. Even if you want us to cut down the statue, we'll do it for you." Luo Tsang cut him off. Although Luo Tsang's words were a bit direct, they represented everyone's thoughts. In their hearts, Long Chen was a true hero, straightforward, just, and upright. In order to help his brothers avoid humiliation, he had still challenged the authority of the monastery and directly killed 5 traitors. Then, after being exiled to a land of certain death, he had somehow walked out alive. And the first thing he had done when he had gotten back was to lead everyone and return the humiliation they had suffered to their oppressors. That kind of boldness had completely won their hearts. Long Chen was an idol, a goal, someone they would follow to death. Even if they were to be expelled or killed, they would still follow this heroic figure. Good, then I won't argue. Let's go all out. Long Chen stamped his foot onto Chi Xian's stomach, and he immediately was awoken from his unconscious state. As soon as he woke up, his body began to shake and he let out a heart-rending shriek like a dying pig. "Speak. Where is Wu Qi?" icily asked Long Chen. "He's at Odd Peak Pavilion Station." Chi Xian stuttered out. It was simply too painful. That medicinal pill Long Chen had given him had caused his pain to multiply by the tens. He was completely unable to endure it and didn't dare resist Long Chen anymore. Long Chen kicked him in the stomach again, directly making him faint. Once he fainted, the world went silent again. but his mournful shriek of a pig about to be slaughtered still echoed in everyone's ears. "Come with me." Long Chen dragged Chi Exin towards the eastern part of the monastery. That was the location of Odd Peak Pavilion, and there was a station where Wu Qi was working. The bystanders were shocked at first, but they then quickly realized Long Chen had gathered everyone not to go fight with Gu Yang, but to attack law enforcers. They were shook, but they were also excited. Probably only Long Chen would dare to think of doing such a provocation. Ever since meeting Long Chen, they had never seen him act according to common sense. There were few who could guess what Long Chen was thinking. Seeing Song Mingyuan and them excitedly following behind Long Chen, Tang Wan'er and Yijiqiu exchanged a glance, smiling bitterly. Men really did forever like to fight. It seemed Long Chen had stirred up their instincts, and even those outer disciples' eyes were shining brightly. Tang Wan'er and Yijiqiu really were speechless in front of that. Looking forward at Long Chen's figure, Tang Wan'er didn't know why, but she felt her blood racing hotly. That was the kind of stimulation that had occurred when she was a child and excitedly done naughty things. Long Chen really was a typical scoundrel, forever not being an obedient child. All bindings and rules were useless to him, existing in name only. He was like a great peng spreading its wings to fly, trying to shake off the bindings of heaven and earth, shattering all restrictions to be completely free. Long Chen led his alliance straight towards Odd Peak Pavilion. On the way, they just happened to encounter some more people. It's Lei Qianshang and Gu Yang. Heavens, they're all wounded. Who did that? Everyone saw the two of them walking over and let out startled cries. The two of them were pale and their auras were chaotic. From the blood covering their bodies, it was obvious they had just experienced a great battle. That was especially true of Gu Yang. Both his arms were bent at odd angles and were clearly broken. As for Lei Qianshang, his abdomen was clearly caved in. Both their injuries were severe. There was immediately someone who ran over to them. That person was one of the core disciples in Gu Yang's alliance. "Brother Gu, Brother Lei, you guys dash. Don't ask for now. Let's just go watch the excitement." Gu Yang cut him off and just followed behind Long Chen. That person immediately followed behind him. At this time, quite a few people thought of a certain possibility and gasped. Within their new generation, there was only one disciple who could injure Gu Yang like this. Then remembering how Long Chen had dragged over Chi Exin, everyone's hearts turned cold. Was he still human? He was more like a monster. 1 against 3, he had defeated and caused them such severe injuries. Seeing Gu Yang follow Long Chen, the crowd also followed. They wanted to see what Long Chen was planning by going to Odd Peak Pavilion. From Long Chen's words, it seemed he was going to find trouble for Wu Qi. They wondered just how Wu Qi had offended Long Chen for him to gather all 5 of his factions. It might have something to do with Long Chen's mount, guessed one person. After all, as soon as Long Chen had returned this time, he had commenced a large-scale investigation of Little Snow's whereabouts. They hadn't particularly cared about keeping that secret, and so everyone heard of it. Although they didn't know the exact details, but from hearing Luo Tsang curse Chi Exin, Long Chen's appearance, and Chi Exin bringing up Wu Qi, they all realized this matter must have involved Chi Exin. Since they didn't know the specifics, no one bothered guessing. They'd find out eventually by following Long Chen. Odd Peak Pavilion was located in a rather remote location on the eastern side of the Xiantian Monastery. It was the station for law enforcers, similar to how each faction had their mountains. Other than when they did their patrols, the law enforcers could normally be found there cultivating. The monastery had a total of 7 such places. Each station had over 10 law enforcers. They were the bottom of the previous generation of disciples. By staying, they were essentially half working and half cultivating. The resources the monastery gave them had to be earned through law enforcer missions. Odd Peak Pavilion was halfway up a mountain. There were over 10 immortal caves there for the senior apprentice brothers. But those law enforcers all had to take turns patrolling. There were only 3 of them resting here at the moment. In front of the station was a large wolf tightly bound by ropes, its body covered with wounds. That was Little Snow, who was now crisscrossed with countless scars. His blood dyed the earth red. Little Snow was angrily glaring at the person in front of him. That person held a long whip in his hand. That whip was lined with countless iron barbs that were all stained red now. The whip once more thrashed down on Little Snow's body, causing him to roar. But his voice was rough now, weak, without any strength. "Senior Apprentice Brother Wu, why don't we just give this up? It's already been 3 days and you still can't make it surrender. Just let it die and we'll have a good meal," suggested one of the law enforcers. They had wasted a great deal of effort to bring this Scarlet Flame Snow Wolf back with them. That was because they had noticed that it didn't have any spiritual imprint. In other words, if they could subdue it, they could place their own spiritual imprint on it and make it amount for one of them. Fuck, this beast is just like that bastard Long Chen. He's like a hard, loathsome turd. This scorpion hook whip has nerve toxins that will cause incomparable pain. Not even peak 3rd rank magical beasts can resist it. But this brute at the initial 3rd rank still refuses to submit to me after this long. It really infuriates me. Wu Qi angrily thrashed his whip onto Little Snow again. "I'll make you submit. If you don't submit, then I'll just whip you to death." Little Snow's body had split open in several places with ghastly wounds. Blood slowly flowed out of his exposed wounds. "Senior Apprentice Brother Wu, if you keep that up, you'll really kill it," warned another law enforcer. "Even a 3rd rank magical beast would die after being beat for 3 days like this." This Scarlet Flame Snow Wolf was already starting to lose consciousness. That meant its core energy was almost exhausted. Once that core energy was exhausted, it would automatically die. This is fucking infuriating. How could that bastard Long Chen manage to force it to surrender? He didn't even use a spiritual imprint. But it still unswervingly follows him. I'm countless times stronger than that bastard Long Chen, so why does he get to have such a powerful mount? Wu Qi became more inflamed as he raged. The Scarlet Flame Snow Wolf was an overlord amongst 3rd rank magical beasts. Once it advanced to the peak of the 3rd rank, it would be an unmatched existence among 3rd rank magical beast. The 3 of them were all mid-tendon transformation experts, but they had wasted a great deal of energy to capture Little Snow. One of them had even been struck back by Little Snow in a final desperation attempt and had received heavy internal injuries. So they could all see how terrifying Little Snow's power was. But such a powerful magical beast had actually decided to follow a rookie like Long Chen. And that rookie was the one who he hated the most, causing him even more fury and enough jealousy to drive him crazy. "Since you refuse to submit, then don't blame me for being vicious. If it's something I, Wu Qi, cannot obtain, then that Long Chen better not even think about getting it." Wu Qi ground his teeth as he looked at Little Snow, who was still glaring back at him. Fury exploded within him and he threw away his whip, taking out a sword. The moment he raised his sword, he suddenly felt a chilling, killing intent, a will that seemed to come straight from a death god, and a murderous bone blade slashed down on him. Chapter 221 Group Fighting Law Enforcers. The instant Long Chen arrived at this law enforcer station, he saw Little Snow on his last breaths. His fury immediately exploded and his killing intent almost made him combust. Wu Qi was actually planning on killing Little Snow. Long Chen's killing intent turned practically solid and he charged forward, his bone blade slashing down on Wu Qi. Wu Qi had never imagined that outsiders would appear at his station. Outsiders were not permitted in the law enforcer stations. Long Chen's practically solid killing intent immediately locked him in place. Wu Qi was alarmed and hastily raised his sword. Bang! The bone blade heavily collided with the sword. A violent force erupted like a volcano. Wu Qi immediately was forced back by that terrifying force. Only then did he have a chance to see who it was. Long Chen, how brazen! You dare intrude on the law enforcer station. Wu Qi was first shocked, but then delighted to see Long Chen. Since the monastery's rules didn't permit disciples to barge into the law enforcer stations, Long Chen had violated the rules. Long Chen's arrival also shocked the other two law enforcers. They had never thought Long Chen would come find them. They all knew this Scarlet Flame Snow Wolf was Long Chen's mount, and that was why they had brought it back secretly. Seeing Long Chen arrive, the other two coldly snorted and charged at Long Chen, wanting to noiselessly capture Long Chen. But the two of them had only just moved forward when a giant man smashed a huge club at them. "You bastards, fuck off!" That club brought with it a fierce gale, and space trembled to the point where it was hard to breathe. The two of them were horrified and hastily raised their weapons. But the two of their weapons shattered apart in front of that club, and both of them shot back dozens of meters before managing to stabilize again. The two of them looked at that person with horror. That person was Wild. Seeing how miserable Little Snow's condition was, Wild's eyes had turned red. He now smashed his club at Wu Qi. Wu Qi was also indescribably shocked. He didn't sense any aura from Wild's body, but his power was too terrifying. Wu Qi didn't dare be the slightest bit careless. His entire aura exploded out. His peak mid-tendon transformation cultivation base was pushed to its max as he slashed his sword at Wild. Sparks flew when their two weapons collided. Wu Qi's sword wasn't an ordinary weapon and didn't shatter. But he himself was unable to withstand Wild's ferocious power and was forced back several steps, feeling his arm turn a bit numb. What terrifying strength! Wu Qi was greatly alarmed. Wild didn't pause the slightest after that attack and ferociously smashed his club at him again. As for the other two law enforcers, only now did they recover from their shock. Taking out their law enforcer chains, they charged at Long Chen. Long Chen was staring at Little Snow. At this time, Little Snow opened his eyes. Although he was unable to move his body, his eyes were filled with warmth. That gaze caused Long Chen's heart to bleed. Even the bone blade in his hand was quivering. An enormous killing intent was storming within him. Those two law enforcers were about to reach him when hundreds of people suddenly rushed over. Guoran immediately saw Little Snow's state as well as Long Chen, who was on the verge of going berserk. His fury soared at how vicious and hateful these bastards were, and he shouted, "Brothers, charge! Beat these bastards to death!" Seeing this scene, even Tang Wan'er and Yijiqiu's killing intent soared. "Charge! Kill these humanless bastards! Fuck these corrupt law enforcers! They really deserve death! This kind of trash are also law enforcers? The monastery really has been blind. Let's clean up the monastery ourselves." Seeing this scene, how could they not understand what was going on? Just what kind of heroic figure was Long Chen? Seeing his body quivering from rage, they could all see how much pain he was in from seeing Little Snow like this. This group of law enforcers really were degenerates. And so everyone's fury was immediately ignited. Originally, everyone had only been in the mood for a good fight. But now they wanted to destroy these bastards. They all took out their weapons and charged at those two law enforcers. Those two law enforcers turned pale. 4-5 core disciples to immediately charge them. They were both shocked and angered. "What nerve? Are you planning on rebelling? Fuck your mom." Luo Zong's character was the most frank, and he directly cursed them. His staff took the vanguard in smashing at that law enforcer. Following Luo Zong, the rest of them also didn't wait, giving them a greeting with their weapons. One reason they attacked so fiercely was because of their extreme hatred for this bastards, but the other reason was because they knew their senior apprentice brothers were powerful experts in the mid-tendon transformation realm. If they didn't attack with their full strength, they'd be the ones to lose. "Long Chen, go look after Little Snow." Tang Wan'er saw that Long Chen's body was quivering from uncontrollable anger, but first he should go save Little Snow. After giving him that reminder, Tang Wan'er summoned a wind blade into her hand and joined the fighting. The Heaven-Earth Alliance's people were all crazily besieging those two law enforcers. Despite being in the mid-tendon transformation realm, they were unprepared to handle so many people and their movements were a mess. On the other side was Wild smashing his club like a madman. His crazy attacks against Wu Qi caused him to constantly retreat. The crowd of people behind the Heaven-Earth Alliance also arrived at this time. Seeing this chaotic battle scene, they were all stupefied. Wild was especially crazy, like some kind of barbarian god. His club was unstoppable and he was not at all inferior to Wu Qi. That was the first time any of them saw how terrifying Wild was. Without the slightest bit of aura, he could fight with just his powerful physical body. Gu Yang, who had just arrived, couldn't help sighing when he saw how powerful Wild was. Ever since he had started cultivating, he had always been unmatched in terms of brute strength. But now Wild's practically divine strength caused him to realize what it meant that a hill could not compare to a large mountain. The previous him had really just been a frog at the bottom of a well. Wu Qi was a squad leader amongst law enforcers, and his cultivation base was top-notch amongst them at the peak of the mid-tendon transformation realm. His combat strength was without equal, but he was repeatedly forced back purely by brute power. That really was shocking. As the others fought, Long Chen took a couple deep breaths. He forced himself to calm down and hastily ran over to Little Snow. "Little Snow, don't be afraid, I'm here. I won't let you suffer anymore." Long Chen couldn't help feeling incomparable pain. Little Snow was covered with wounds. Looking at those scars was more painful than if he was being whipped. "Wu," Little Snow quietly called out, wanting to express something. But he didn't have that much energy. "Here, swallow this." Long Chen took out a pearl from his spatial ring. That was the gift the spirit world expert had left for him. The pearl contained a vast amount of life essence. Previously, when Wild had been tortured to the point of having just a single breath left and was on the verge of death, it was this pearl that had pulled him back from the hands of the Grim Reaper. This time, although Little Snow was covered in injuries, his life wasn't actually in danger. He had simply lost too much blood and energy, and so he was temporarily extremely weak. Such wounds could be slowly healed through normal means. But Long Chen couldn't wait for that. For Little Snow, he once more took out this precious treasure. He directly took out a drop of that precious divine life essence from the pearl. That pearl immediately shrunk. "Here, Little Snow, swallow this." Hearing Long Chen's voice, Little Snow pitifully did his best to open his mouth, but did not succeed. Long Chen had no choice but to pull open his mouth and place that drop of life essence into his mouth. Only after he sensed that drop of life essence nourishing Little Snow's body did he relax. Gently rubbing Little Snow's head, he consoled, "Sleep. We won't have to part again." Long Chen used his spiritual strength to put Little Snow to sleep. The main thing was that Little Snow was too weak now. Seeing Long Chen caused him to immediately relax, and so he easily entered a deep slumber. Long Chen looked around and saw Yu Zifeng amongst the crowd. After the struggle over the profound spirit fruit, he had never had any further interactions with him. Although they weren't friends, they also couldn't count as enemies. "Brother Yu, help me out. Call over some of your people to protect this little fellow for now," asked Long Chen. Yu Zifeng was startled, but he nodded. "Don't worry, Brother Long, I'll definitely protect him properly." Yu Zifeng hadn't expected Long Chen to have such trust in him that he would place his mount temporarily in his care. He immediately waved out to the people behind him, and around 50 people walked out and formed a protective ring around Little Snow. While Long Chen had been healing Little Snow's wounds, the fight had reached its climax. Being surrounded and attacked by everyone, those law enforcers were already completely enraged. Facing those people who didn't even seem afraid of death, the both of them also began to use some ruthless attacks. Quite a few people were forced back, coughing up blood. The difference between them was difficult to make up. The ordinary disciples had just stepped into the tendon transformation realm and couldn't even count as having reached the first heaven stage. They were much weaker than their mid-tendon transformation senior apprentice brothers. Other than the core disciples who could just barely face off against them, the rest of them would immediately be sent flying as soon as they collided with their chains. That was the difference between the two parties. If you guys still don't learn how to appreciate our kindness, don't blame us for being ruthless. We could easily kill you all one by one. You should know that you've violated the monastery's rules. Even if we kill you all, we won't receive any punishment, raged one of the law enforcers. Fuck your rules. Shut your hole, we don't want your crap. You bastards can go to hell. Although there were occasionally some of them who were forced back with injuries, there was not one of them who shrunk back. They all continued attacking ferociously. Their companions' injuries didn't cause them to feel fear, but further provoked their fighting spirit. The watchers also felt their blood boiling. What were companions? What were brothers? What did it mean for you to give your back to others? They all finally understood why Long Chen had been set on killing those traitors, why he would not allow any betrayal. Such a fierce fight where their fellows were unafraid of death caused all of them to be moved. Only absolute conviction could lead to such a terrifying combat strength. Now that Little Snow was carefully guarded, Long Chen nodded to Yu Zifeng in thanks. This way he could fight at ease. His bone blade once more appeared in his hands. He saw that Wild was still fiercely fighting. It didn't seem as if he could defeat Wu Qi, but for the moment, he was in no danger. But the other battle was extremely intense, with people being injured and flying out, unable to continue. Long Chen's eyes reddened. Those were his brothers. He charged forward at one of those law enforcers, his bone blade slashing down on his head. Chapter 222 Abusive Authorities. One law enforcer was surrounded by Song Mingyuan, Li Qi, and Luo Tsong. There were also tens of ordinary disciples launching attacks when they openings, infuriating the law enforcer. His chain whistled through the air and the power of a mid-tendon transformation expert exploded out, forcing everyone to retreat. The difference between him and the new generation's disciples was too great. Even Song Mingyuan and the other core disciples were forced back when his chain struck their weapons, causing their arms to ache. They were simply not on the same level. The three battlefields were extremely different. One battlefield was where Wild was fighting Wu Qi alone. As the battle progressed, he began fighting stronger and stronger, never entering a disadvantage. As for Tang Wan'er and Yi Zhiqiu, the two of them managed to hold down another law enforcer on their own. Although it was extremely taxing, they were still able to endure. But Song Mingyuan's group had entered a dangerous state. They had the most injured people and they might be defeated at any moment. That caused them to angrily persevere. The other disciples also didn't slack off. When one person was sent flying, another would immediately take his place. And unless the injuries were so severe that they couldn't even crawl up, no one retreated. A group of idiots. You guys are asking for death. That law enforcer was infuriated at being besieged from all sides. Although he said he wouldn't receive any blame for killing them, did he really dare kill them? They were not entirely free from fault. They had captured someone else's mount. If they ended up killing people who had come to take vengeance for that, they would not be able to escape their punishment. But in his fury, although he didn't dare kill anyone, he was happy to give them extremely harsh injuries. His chain whistled through the air, immediately forcing back everyone. There were several disciples who were hit and sent flying, coughing out blood. Fuck off! That law enforcer angrily roared very impressively. But he only just roared when he suddenly felt a cold, terrifying killing intent lock him in place, making him feel as if he had entered an ice house. A bone blade that appeared as if it had come from the depths of hell to take his life stabbed right at his face. That tricky angle was extremely ruthless. That bone blade's power had been condensed greatly. That law enforcer knew that if he took that attack, his head would immediately explode. He wants to kill me. That law enforcer was horrified. This attack was extremely simple and direct. He wanted to kill him in just one blow. He quickly stepped back, bringing his chain up to block the bone blade. But what appalled him was that his chain, which could easily force back a core disciple's attack, was unable to shake that bone blade at all. The bone blade merely paused ever so slightly before continuing down, its speed shockingly fast as it reached his forehead. His soul almost fled his body in fright, his heart almost leaping out of his chest. He frantically twisted his head to the side. Although he managed to avoid being killed, that bone blade still left behind a line of blood on his forehead. If he hadn't instinctively turned his head at that last moment, that bone blade would have penetrated straight through his skull. The arrival of that bone blade had been extremely shocking to all. In one blow it narrowly missed killing a law enforcer, giving Song Mingyuan and them a shock. Long Chen. They didn't know when he had come, but now he was amongst them, pointing his bone blade at that horrified law enforcer. Long Chen's face was icy cold now. And yet, his eyes were completely calm, a deathly kind of calm. That kind of calm was even more terrifying. That law enforcer who was being stared at felt his heart might stop. Long Chen suddenly disappeared, appearing before the law enforcer again, his bone blade directly aiming for his neck. Long Chen's appearance caused Song Mingyuan and them to all stop. They felt that if they did go now, not only would that not help, but they might obstruct him. It was better for them to leave the vanguard to Long Chen. Furthermore, Long Chen's attack was filled with an unstoppable killing intent. It was completely different from their fighting style. They wouldn't be able to intervene in any case. The most exciting thing about Long Chen's fight was that domineering manner of his. That sight caused their blood to boil. That law enforcer almost just ran for his life when he saw Long Chen charging at him. His courage had already been broken, just now he had almost died. Although he had cultivated for this long, other than that trial to join the monastery, he had never experienced any true life and death battles. But Long Chen was not the same. He had fought his way back from the brink of death many times. His powerful will and his accumulated killing spirit caused his opponents to turn cold, greatly affecting that ability to fight. If a person was affected by Long Chen's imposingness and ended up feeling intense terror in their heart, then they would be unable to even bring out their full power. That was also why the life and death trial to join the monastery had been arranged. It was to firm everyone's wills, allowing them to hopefully display more strength in life and death battles. But just one life and death battle was far from enough to completely firm a person's will. They weren't like Long Chen, who had continuously faced death in the face. Only through that tempering had he gained an unyielding will that would disdainfully look down on the threat of death. That law enforcer brought up his chain, but it was brushed away by Long Chen's blade. Long Chen took another step, twisted his body, bringing his blade arcing to his waist. His courage had already been broken by Long Chen's murderous spirit. All he could do was defend without daring to attack. Long Chen's twisting cut was a continuation on his previous move. The angle was extremely strange, and it was precisely where the law enforcer couldn't bring forth much strength. No matter how he defended, he would be unable to completely block this one. Under normal circumstances, he should have been able to use his chain to block and then retreat. Even if his chains weren't able to entirely block him, his speed was enough that he would have been likely to get away. And furthermore, even if he wasn't able to dodge, Long Chen's bone blade was a beast's tooth. Other than the point, it wasn't sharp anywhere else. If he actually blocked and dodged properly, it would be impossible for it to give him any heavy injuries. But his courage had already been broken by Long Chen's first attack. His mind was empty of everything except terror. He wasn't thinking at all about how Long Chen's weapon wasn't sharp enough. He knew Long Chen wanted to kill him. To him, being hit by Long Chen's blade would cause him to immediately be cut in half. In his panic, he had already become stupid, forgetting how to dodge and block properly. Long Chen's bone blade ruthlessly smashed into that law enforcer's rib cartilage, bringing with it a miserable scream and the sound of bones breaking as he was sent flying. That stupefied everyone. That power law enforcer was unable to endure 10 exchanges with Long Chen before being severely injured. Those people watching could all see that it wasn't because Long Chen's combat strength was high, but because that law enforcer had been completely suppressed by Long Chen's imposing manner. His cultivation base had already been oppressed to below 80%, and adding on his fear and nervousness that led to his mistakes in judgment, he was easily defeated by Long Chen. Everyone's heart shook. Long Chen used his own actions to tell everyone a certain rule: a higher cultivation base didn't necessarily mean you were stronger. The person with the higher cultivation base wouldn't always win. Long Chen had managed to win while being weaker. But that also wasn't entirely true. Although his cultivation base was weaker, he had his unstoppable mannerism, that resolution that was unafraid of death, and that powerful conviction in his complete victory. Previously, none of these disciples understood what an imposing mannerism, resolution, or conviction really were. They were just vague concepts. But Long Chen's display today showed everyone just how important those concepts were. Gu Yang, Lei Qianshang, Guan Wennan, and the other core disciples all finally understood why Long Chen was so strong. That was because of his powerful conviction, an unequaled conviction whose resolution could not be shaken by anyone. Even in the face of death, his conviction would not sway. That was one of the requirements to be a true expert. As for them, their family's elders had all imprinted upon them a false theory, that talent was the foundation to become an expert. No matter how good such a foundation was, without that drive to fight despite 1,000 setbacks, without that conviction to become an expert that would not sway even in the face of death, you would forever be a greenhouse plant unable to endure a single night's frost. That law enforcer was a perfect example. He normally acted strong with such a lofty manner. But when it came to a true life and death juncture, his active strength was completely shattered, revealing how weak he really was. And completely opposite to him was Long Chen. He seemed so ordinary on the outside, not at all strong. But when it came time to truly risk it all, people would find that beneath that ordinary exterior was an iron will. Long Chen's display let them see another kind of future for themselves. Almost all the disciples felt their hearts become much clearer. They were filled with gratitude and respect for that incredibly imposing, practically celestial being. After sending that law enforcer flying, Long Chen suddenly appeared before him again, bringing his bone blade down on his head. What? Everyone was greatly shocked now. That law enforcer was so heavily wounded there was no way he could dodge. Long Chen was really planning on killing him. Stop! Suddenly a cold shout shook everyone's ears. A ray of black light smashed into Long Chen's bone blade that was about to kill that law enforcer. Long Chen felt a sharp pain in his arm and a powerful force sent him flying. His blood surged and he almost coughed up blood. Turning to look, he saw that at some point a furious elder son had appeared before everyone. Elder son's arrival alarmed everyone and they all retreated. None of them had thought that they would have disturbed an elder so quickly. Tang Wan'er's heart sunk the instant she saw him. She had a bad feeling now. Elder son pointed at Long Chen and shouted, "At such a young age you are already so vicious. How are you any different from corrupt devils? If I don't suppress you a bit today, how will we keep the natural order of things?" A heavy pressure immediately spread from his body, covering everyone. It was difficult for them to even breathe under his pressure, and they even felt their bones might break under it. The ordinary disciples were already pale, blood dripping out of the corner of some of their mouths. But all of them held firm, refusing to submit to that pressure. "Long Chen, you've brazenly mustered a group to fight the law enforcers. Such an offense cannot be forgiven. Hurry up and kneel." Elder son's pressure gathered entirely on Long Chen, causing him to immediately feel as if a mountain was crushing him. Icy cold killing intent filled Long Chen's eyes. Looking at the sanctimonious elder son, he slowly raised the bone blade in his hand. "Outrageous! You actually dare rebel?" Elder son raged. He was about to continue increasing the pressure when he felt a wind at the back of his head. "Old stick, go die." A huge spiked club smashed at elder son's head. Chapter 223 No Rest Until Death. Following an angry roar, a huge spiked club smashed towards the back of elder son's head. That completely surprised elder son. Under his pressure, there shouldn't have been anyone capable of moving, not even the core disciples. Without turning his head, he punched out behind him. But what was even more shocking to him was that this attack was so powerful that he was actually forced back a couple steps. He hastily turned to see that it was some giant fellow holding a huge club glaring at him. It seemed as if his pressure didn't have any effect of this fellow. Furthermore, That previous blow had been completely abnormal, capable of even forcing him, a bone-forging expert, back a couple steps. Who are you? Elder's son didn't recognize this person. Who are you, my ass? You old crap, you dare bully my brother Long? Hit my club. Wild roared and smashed his club down on Elder's son again. Rude brat. Elder's son's expression changed. He had given him some courtesy because he was afraid he was a disciple of some elder. That would have been troublesome. But he hadn't thought this brat would insult him like this, and his fury exploded. Boom! Wild let out a muffled shout as he was sent flying. He directly smashed apart a huge boulder in the distance. But what shocked everyone was that despite receiving such a powerful blow, Wild wasn't injured at all. He got up from the ground and once more charged forward with his club. Elder's son was about to retaliate when suddenly he felt a whistling gale on the other side going for his neck. Long Chen had actually also attacked him at this moment. This time everyone really was stupefied. He actually attacked an elder? Did he care about his life anymore? Bastards! Elder's son roared and a powerful surge of invisible energy sent both Long Chen and Wild flying. This is the power of bone forging? How terrifying! People muttered to themselves. It was said when cultivators stepped into the bone forging realm, their spiritual chi could be released outside as pressure. Without even moving your body, it was possible to just use that pressure to crush your opponents to death. But that was also something that was only possible when a bone forging expert's cultivation base had reached an extremely solidified level. The secular world's bone forging experts were unable to do that. Even with Long Chen and Wild's power, they were unable to resist that pressure. Violating the rules and then daring to resist, you really are asking for death. Elder's son harshly shouted. Long Chen felt his blood surging in his body. A bone forging expert really was too terrifying. He was far from being a match for him. Elder's son, please try to distinguish right and wrong first. Don't wrongly accuse others before investigating the truth, Tang Wan'er angrily shouted, her whole body trembling from rage. Last time Elder's son had intentionally targeting Long Chen, and now he was even more directly suppressing him. That really was hateful. You're doubting my eyes? I personally saw you all muster and attack the law enforcers, viciously injuring them. You still want to quibble? Snorted Elder's son. You dash. One, don't waste words with this old bastard. Since he wants to target me, let me make this a bit more exciting. Long Chen cut Tang Wan'er off, as that was useless. He was clearer than anyone here as to what this old bastard was thinking. In front of everyone's puzzled eyes, Long Chen took out his disciple badge. Using his bone blade, he cut along across his left hand, leaving a line of blood. He then placed that bleeding hand on the badge, causing dazzling light to immediately shine from it. A resounding bell sound rang out throughout every inch of the Xiantian monastery. What? Long Chen issued a life and death challenge? People let out startled cries. The monastery had a certain rule. If there were irreconcilable differences between two people, you could issue a life and death challenge. Once a life and death challenge was issued, the opposing party had to accept. If they didn't, they would be expelled from the monastery. That was an extremely odd rule, but it was precisely because it was so strange that Long Chen remembered it now. The way to issue it was to have your blood activate your badge. Once you did, the monastery's bell would alert everyone. Once that bell rung, his badge immediately became invalid. In other words, if he wanted to continue staying in the monastery, he must kill his opponent and snatch his badge. Elder Son's expression changed. A life and death challenge would disturb the entire monastery. And as expected, countless people immediately began to rush over. Who issued the life and death challenge? Suddenly, space trembled as three figures abruptly appeared. One of them was sect leader Ling Yunzi. A life and death challenge was no small matter. If the sect leader wasn't in seclusion, he had to personally oversee it. Beside Ling Yunzi was Tu Feng as well as another thin, withered old man. He only had a couple strands of hair and his temples were caved in, giving him a frightening appearance. When that old man appeared, he immediately saw Wild in his sorry position and his expression sunk. "Little fellow, what happened to you? Tell master who bullied you and master will break his claws." Although that withered old man was small, his voice was like a drum, shaking the entire mountain. Several disciples turned pale and almost fainted. Such an unremarkable old man was shockingly so powerful. And he actually called the giant fellow his apprentice. Elder Son's expression turned green when he heard that appellation. Terror appeared in his eyes, replacing that overbearing arrogance. Wild pointed to Elder Son and raged, "That old bastard didn't even listen about who was right and who was wrong before wrongly accusing my brother Long. I can't beat him, so old man, you help me beat him." The old man was really infuriated now. He glared at Elder Son, causing his face to turn from green to blue, and he stammered, "Granduncle Master, I dash." Everyone's eyes popped out as that old man didn't even give Elder Son a chance to explain and slapped him right in the face. Elder Son immediately coughed up blood and flew back. Over 10 teeth glittered through the air. His body collided on the immortal caves behind him, causing an avalanche of tumbling stones. Ling Yunzi sighed and bitterly smiled, "Uncle Master, can you at least let people explain themselves?" Hearing Ling Yunzi's words gave everyone a shock. So this unremarkable man was actually the sect leader's Uncle Master. It was no wonder Elder Son was so terrified. His status was so high it was shocking. And it was also no wonder he was so strong. He had used some kind of unknown technique to give Elder Son a slap despite the space separating the two of them. That was practically a magical technique. It wasn't even possible to see his attack, let alone dodge. People looked in shock from the old man to Wild and then Long Chen. This would be a good show now. "What did you say? Just what kind of senior disciple are you? You let your junior disciples be bullied like this and don't do anything. So what if I give this brat a lesson? Are you all grown up and dare challenge your Uncle Master? Do you want to have some practice between us?" Raged that old man. Ling Yunzi smiled bitterly. This Uncle Master's cultivation base was frightening, but his temperament was extremely explosive, perhaps even completely unreasonable. But he also refused to accept that shortcoming, so Ling Yunzi didn't dare keep talking. "Humph, did you forget who saved you when you were bullied by that ghost gate brat? Ungrateful kid." The old man was still scolding. Ling Yunzi felt his face grow hot. Being scolded in front of this many people really was embarrassing. But he then remembered that whenever he had caused a disaster back then and was about to be punished by his master, it was always this Uncle Master who had saved him. Even when he suffered outside, it was this Uncle Master who had done everything to help him grow. In reality, he had doted on him even more than his master. This Uncle Master's cultivation base was incredibly powerful. Unfortunately, his temperament wasn't so good. He was disinclined to even give others a glance. When Tu Feng had brought Wild back, this Uncle Master's eyes had immediately turned red and he had immediately grabbed Wild. He doted and pampered Wild crazily, giving him anything he wanted. But other than eating, Wild didn't want anything else. And so in order to let Wild eat to his full, he also stopped cultivating and brought Wild out of the monastery and personally brought him hunting, treating him like he was his own son. This time they had just returned to the monastery when Wild had heard Long Chen was also in the monastery, and he had rushed over. The old man had been in the midst of drinking tea with Ling Yunzi and Tu Feng, praising and applauding Wild's abnormal physical body, practically babbling non-stop. But he had only managed to babble for a while before Long Chen issued his life and death challenge. That had irritated him greatly. He had just reached the interesting part of his story. But he also knew a life and death challenge was a major affair and that the sect leader had to be present according to the monastery's rules. That was because it was something that related to their disciples' life and death. Normally such a challenge would rarely be issued. But if it was issued, that would mean there was an unerasable and unconcealable hatred between two parties. Just one or two disciples' deaths wouldn't be able to affect the monastery's development, but in order to prevent further similar situations, They had to be treated with the proper attention of the monastery. There was no way the rules could be absolutely perfect. People had to constantly adjust them to improve them. Otherwise, if people used loopholes in the rules and more of these conflicts appeared and grew more intense, that would influence the monastery's growth. The old man scolded some more, but seeing Ling Yunzi merely continued to smile, he also began to feel embarrassed. He turned to viciously glare at elder son who had just crawled out of the stones. Ling Yunzi was afraid this uncle master would continue beating others, and he hastily coughed. Who issued the life and death challenge? This disciple. Long Chen walked forward. Seeing that it was Long Chen, Ling Yunzi and Tu Feng gave each other a furtive glance. They both saw what was written on the other's face. Of course it's him. Who did you issue the life and death challenge to? Disciple Long Chen issued the life and death challenge to law enforcer Wu Qi. With blood as my oath, I will not rest until one of us is dead. Long Chen raised his metal, his gaze glaring knives at Wu Qi. His voice was filled with a soaring killing intent. Today, one of them would die. Chapter 224 Death Deciding Stage. Although everyone was already prepared for it, hearing Long Chen's voice still greatly shocked everyone. He had actually issued a life and death challenge to a peak mid-tendon transformation expert. This was no ordinary challenge. Unless one party backed out, one of them had to die today. An icy smile appeared on Wu Qi's face. Long Chen was powerful, but in his eyes, Long Chen had never been an actual match for him. If it weren't for the monastery restricting him, he would have long since killed Long Chen. The fact that Long Chen would just send himself to be killed by him like this was a nice surprise. You have to think this through, Long Chen. Once the life and death challenge is issued, one party will die. This isn't a game. If you feel you have received injustice or unfair treatment, you can make a complaint to me, solemnly warned Ling Yunzi. A life and death challenge was something that was only to be issued when the differences had reached an irreconcilable level. Unless the hatred between the two parties had reached an extremely high level, no one would issue such a challenge. Ling Yunzi was worried. Although he was sure Long Chen was a divergent, a legendary existence that would only die beneath the heavenly Daos, those were just legends. A divergent had not appeared in who knew how many tens of thousands of years. And even if one had appeared, no one would know about them. Only when those people were destroyed under a world-eradicating divine punishment would people realize that they had been a divergent. But in all the recorded history, there had only ever been 3 definite divergents. Furthermore, they had existed so long ago that those recordings were very vague. And so no one could be sure of any exact details about divergence, and the legends could not be entirely trusted. Although Long Chen was powerful, in front of a peak mid-tendon transformation expert, he would definitely lose. And so that was why Ling Yunzi gave Long Chen this option to simply give him his complaints about any injustices. If Wu Qi really had abused his authority against him, he would get justice for Long Chen. Reporting to sect leader, what happened was Tang Wana quickly walked out and was about to explain what had happened. But Long Chen waved his hand. Great sect leader, in this world where only strength is respected, there is never any fairness or justice. Complaints of unfairness are just the excuses of the weak, only confirming their own incompetence and foolishness. And since the world has no fairness, then we should use strength to speak. Please help me out, great sect leader. Long Chen. Tang Wanner's expression changed. He was clearly on the righteous side, but he refused to explain himself, stubbornly issuing this life and death challenge. That Wu Qi was a peak mid-tendon transformation expert, and Long Chen was definitely not his match. He was just sending himself to death. Tang Wanner grumbled inside. Why was Long Chen sometimes so smart that people felt he was a sage, yet sometimes so foolish that nothing could save him? Faction leader, don't try to persuade him. I understand the boss. He wants to personally revenge his enmity and not want to rely on the monastery's power to punish Wu Qi, said Guoran. Having been with Long Chen for this long, Guoran had a great understanding of Long Chen's character. Long Chen wouldn't easily become angry, But once he did, that meant that something had touched upon his taboos. Furthermore, he was not entirely free from fault in this matter. First of all, Little Snow couldn't formally be considered his house pet since he hadn't placed a spiritual imprint on him. There was no way to definitively prove they knew this was Long Chen's magical beast. Wu Qi could easily make an excuse for himself by saying he had accidentally stumbled upon a magical beast in the wilderness and wanted to subdue it. An ownerless magical beast was something anyone had the right to subdue for their own. Even killing them was no problem. If Wu Qi simply said he didn't know this was Long Chen's magical beast, there wasn't much they could do. Little Snow had no markings on him that showed he was Long Chen's. And with no spiritual imprint, he definitely had a leg to stand on. Even the sect leader would not be able to prove the truth. And it was only because Wu Qi had known that he had been so brazen as to capture Little Snow. With Long Chen's intelligence, how could he not realize Wu Qi was sure of his own safety? So there was no way to get revenge through that route. And so Long Chen was disinclined to explain himself, directly forcing the life and death challenge. Tu Feng's expression changed slightly, as he could easily tell that Long Chen had no chance of defeating Wu Qi. But in accordance to the monastery's rules, not even the sect leader could change what was happening. He could only be worried inside. Long Chen was really too stubborn, not even knowing when to retreat. Tu Feng could only helplessly sigh. You have to bethink this thought. Once the challenge is issued, there's no way to change it, once more warned Ling Yunzi. Many thanks for the warning, sect leader. Disciple is sure. Long Chen cupped his hands to Ling Yunzi, knowing he was looking out for him. But he had to do this. Seeing Little Snow's condition gave him so much fury he felt he might explode. If he couldn't personally kill Wu Qi, living would be a complete disgrace to him. Although he had no guarantee against a peak mid-tendon transformation expert, he no longer cared. This time it wasn't that will in the back of his head that wasn't forcing him, but his own will. No one would hurt those close to him without paying a price. Wu Qi, do you accept the challenge? Ling Yunzi turned to glance at Wu Qi lightly. Wu Qi immediately felt as if all his thoughts were laid bare before Ling Yunzi. It was as if Ling Yunzi's indifferent gaze could see completely through him, causing him to sweat. Disciples accepts the challenge. Wu Qi lowered his head, not even daring to look Ling Yunzi in the eyes. If he didn't accept the challenge, he would be expelled from the monastery. That was the harshest part of the life and death challenge. If you accepted the challenge, you theoretically had a 50% of death. If you didn't accept the challenge, you would immediately have to scram. That was also why most similar situations were to be mediated differently. With this method, the monastery would lose one disciple no matter what. Everyone was silent. Their hearts sunk now that Wu Qi had accepted the challenge. This was an extremely unequal fight. But it was initiated by Long Chen. Those disciples watching couldn't help feeling dissatisfied with this, as they were all members of the new generation. Anyone in Long Chen's position would be feeling endless humiliation. If they were Long Chen, they would definitely have just endured it. They wouldn't go issuing a life and death challenge against someone they clearly knew they couldn't defeat. This was complete folly. But this kind of foolishness was also not something that just anyone had the courage to do. Fine, follow me. Ling Yunzi sighed and waved his hand. Their vision changed and they felt their bodies jolt, reappearing at an open space in the rear mountains of the monastery. This completely open space was hundreds of miles wide. But within that wide open space was an enormous iron cage with a huge monolith inside. The monolith was completely square and hundreds of meters high. None of the disciples knew why it was locked within this iron cage. This is the death-deciding stage, sighed Tu Feng. Now that the situation had developed to this point, there was no longer any retreat. He took out a spirit stone and placed onto a stele in front of the death-deciding stage. The stele had a groove just for that spirit stone. The stele lit up when the spirit stone was placed on it. The land began to shake intensely, giving everyone a fright. They were awed to see that the huge monolith inside the cage was rising up. Who knew just how heavy it was for it to be able to shake this land like it was? When it rose over 30 meters, it revealed a martial arena below it. People were startled to see a strange thing on top the martial arena. It seemed like a drawing. "It's two people," exclaimed someone. The drawing seemed to be of two people, but they had been crushed into a flat paste. They were horrified to see these corpses. Then when they looked at the huge monolith that was hundreds of meters thick, they immediately realized how they had died. Suddenly, a breeze blew by, and that drawing blew away. Due to how many years it had been, those corpses had long since turned to ashes. With just a burst of wind, the martial arena returned to its normal state. People's scalps turned numb. No wonder this was called the death-deciding stage. The death-deciding stage will only be open for 2 hours. If neither of you is able to kill the other in that time, the rebirth monolith will fall. You can all see how heavy the rebirth monolith is. If it were to fall, not even someone at the elder level would be able to survive. Do your best to kill your opponent before the time is up, or you'll end up like the last two, solemnly warned Tufong. An iron gate opened onto the arena. This small opening of the huge iron cage looked just like the mouth of a savage beast. Long Chen nodded and gestured at Tang Wanner and them to be at ease before just calmly walking onto the death-deciding stage. "Little Wild, this brother of yours isn't bad. He's got guts. This old man likes that style." The old man looked at Long Chen brightly with a bit of admiration. "But are you not worried for him?" "What do I need to be worried about? My brother Long is super strong. No one can beat him." Wild shook his head. He was practically blindly confident in Long Chen. Of everyone present, Wild was the only one who wasn't worried for Long Chen. In his eyes, Long Chen was an undefeatable god. Even if Long Chen were to fight Ling Yunzi, Wild would still think Long Chen would win. That old man couldn't help shaking his head. With his eyesight, he naturally managed to see through Long Chen's cultivation base. He was at the peak of blood condensation, his blood and qi were surging, and his fighting power was definitely strong. But his physical body was still quite a bit weaker than Wild's, and that saber-tooth bone blade he had wasn't a true weapon, so its power was also not great. And so Long Chen essentially had no chance of defeating Wu Qi. If Long Chen could even manage to keep surviving until the rebirth monolith fell, that would already be amazing to him. "If he can survive, then I'll personally go make him a weapon," muttered the old man. "Old man, you should go back now," said Wild. "Why?" "My brother Long will definitely win. If you start making the weapon now, you can save some more time. What are you wasting time here for?" Wild said simple-mindedly as if Long Chen's victory was already set in stone. That old man actually laughed. He knew Wild's temperament, so he didn't say any more, turning back to look at the death-deciding stage. At this point, Wu Qi also walked in. After Wu Qi entered, the gate immediately shut. A groove in the rebirth monolith lit up, and people saw that it was already starting to slowly descend. This death-deciding battle had begun. Chapter 225, Asking to be Killed. When the iron gate closed, the rebirth monolith at the top of their heads began to slowly descend. According to Elder Tufong, they only had 2 hours. If they couldn't kill their opponent in 2 hours, the rebirth monolith would fall, and their fates would be the same as those two drawings from before. Wu Qi unsheathed his long sword, and the aura of the peak mid-tendon transformation realm immediately erupted. "This son of a bitch was actually hiding his strength," raged Wild. When he had fought Wu Qi had clearly not possessed such power. "Foolish kid, that's obvious. This is a life and death battle, not a normal fight. Who would hold anything back?" scolded the old man. "Bastard, if I had known he was so sneaky, I would have smashed him with my club." Wild regretfully raged. Just watch calmly." Wu Qi's completely unrestrained aura astonished everyone. Even from hundreds of meters away, they could still sense an incredible pressure. Wu Qi was much, much stronger than those previous two law enforcers. Tang Wanner and the others were incredibly worried now. But then seeing how calm Long Chen looked atop the death-deciding stage, they calmed back down a bit. The current Long Chen did not appear angry, nor did he appear nervous, nor did he appear afraid. His eyes were merely completely calm, a calmness that was even a bit frightening. There was not even the slightest emotion of his face. It was like he was just a spectator watching this. Now that you're about to die, you suddenly decide to be calm? Wu Qi raised his sword. The space around it was constantly trembling from its might. The person who will die is you, Long Chen icily replied, his bone blade resting on his shoulder, his aura constantly rising. His huge divine ring appeared behind him. Even the huge rebirth monolith was unable to block it from crazily absorbing energy from heaven and earth. Long Chen's aura quickly rose, going from a small kitten to a fierce tiger. At the same time, a rumbling came from his body. His aura caused the space around him to become unstable. What sound is that? Everyone could hear an extremely odd sound. It was almost like the roaring of a river. Wild's master, Ling Yunzi, and Tu Feng all looked in shock at Long Chen. They had found the source of that sound. It's the sound of his blood flowing, Tu Feng muttered to himself. That was the roaring of Long Chen's blood. That was something that would happen when people entered the peak of blood condensation. But for most cultivators, if that sound was able to be heard even a meter away, that would already mean they were extremely powerful. If that sound could be heard over a couple meters away, that meant a person's qi and blood had reached a shocking point, that their physical body was without compare. Even Gu Yang with his powerful physical body was only able to let that sound transmit out 30 meters. But now Long Chen's blood sounded like the pounding of a war drum. It could be clearly heard even 500 meters away, and it even echoed along the surrounding mountains. It was truly shocking. This fight was not the same as when he had fought Gu Yang. Although Long Chen detested Gu Yang and them, they were all cultivators who were struggling for resources. And so he didn't completely hate them. But Little Snow's miserable state had completely infuriated him. That desire to slaughter, which he had suppressed for so long, finally erupted. Long Chen had always been a bit afraid of this desire for slaughter within him. He could sense that this desire came from the 9-star hegemon body art. This desire had erupted out of his control once before. That was when his whole family's lives had been at stake. At that time, Long Chen had killed that white-robed man. But by now he had realized that that white-robed man was actually only slightly stronger than the secular world's tendon transformation cultivators. He wasn't even close to the same level as the tendon transformation experts in the monastery. That was the difference between coming from a weak sect and a powerful sect like the Xiantian monastery. Facing a true peak mid-tendon transformation expert now, Long Chen also didn't hold anything back, completely letting out his desire for slaughter. Only when he no longer suppressed that desire would the 9-star hegemon body art reach its peak state. His blood roared, and countless golden particles flowed within it, his aura becoming increasingly powerful. Not bad, but it's unfortunate you're only a brat in the blood condensation realm. Today, the only one who will die is you. Maybe you should say some final words to your friends now, otherwise you won't have a chance later, sneered Wu Qi. The energy from Long Chen's body immediately doubled. Pointing his bone blade at Wu Qi, Long Chen icily said, "Put away your infantile words. If you try to give me, Long Chen, a psychological blow, then that will just reveal your own heart's terror. Do you think I can't see the panic in your eyes? You're afraid of being unable to kill me in the time limit and dying with me. You want to break my confidence, hoping to use words to break my spirit. Don't bother. In my life, I, Long Chen, have been attacked by countless enemies. I've experienced countless life and death battles, and I've walked out from the line between life and death. Do you really think your juvenile methods are able to shake my confidence?" Long Chen's voice was full of disdain. His powerful confidence made is that no one doubted the veracity of his words. Song Mingyuan and them were astonished. If what Long Chen said was true, then he had really experienced absolutely terrifying things. Teach rubbish. Since you don't want to be more tactful, then you can just die now. Wu Qi roared and rushed at Long Chen, ruthlessly slashing his sword at Long Chen's face. His attack was extremely fast. As soon as he had moved, his sword had already practically reached Long Chen. His footwork was extremely sly. But what shocked everyone was that Long Chen acted as if he didn't see Wu Qi's sword, stabbing his bone blade at Wu Qi's stomach. The bone blade was over 3 meters long. The instant Wu Qi's sword would slice through Long Chen's face, his bone blade would also definitely pierce through his stomach. This was a move to bring down an opponent with you, a suicide move. But Long Chen's expression was still completely calm. There was not even the slightest ripple. It was as if he didn't even care about his own life. But while Long Chen might not care about his life, Wu Qi definitely. He was absolutely horrified. He quickly brought back his long sword to block Long Chen's bone blade. With his powerful tendon transformation cultivation base, Long Chen's full force stab was blocked by him. As expected, you're afraid of death, ridiculed Long Chen icily. Bastard! Wu Qi roared. Although he had blocked Long Chen's bone blade, the power that had been behind it made his heart grow cold, almost injuring his inner organs. He knew that all of Long Chen's power had been concentrated on that bone blade. If he had been thrust through by it, the power behind it would have erupted like a volcano and he would definitely have died. Wu Qi roared and strange lines appeared over his sword. A cold ray of sword qi slashed down on Long Chen. But what was outside of everyone's expectations was that Long Chen also raised his bone blade high into the air. Parting wind slash. Long Chen again seemed to act as if he still didn't see Wu Qi's attack. A terrifying blade image appeared, slashing down on Wu Qi. This was clearly another suicidal attack to bring them both down. Wu Qi was horrified. His sword qi would definitely kill Long Chen. But Long Chen's blade image would also cut him to pieces. It was already too late to dodge. He went all out to tilt his sword qi, bringing it clashing against Long Chen's blade image. When the two collided, Wu Qi immediately coughed out a mouthful of blood and retreated a couple steps. That injury wasn't because of just Long Chen's blade image. It was the effect of both their attacks. In order to forcibly change the direction of his sword qi, he had ended up receiving an internal impact. In ordinary times, that was just a slight shock and nothing to worry about. But Long Chen's full-strength blade image had then crashed down on him. His sword qi had ended up losing over half its power because he had forcibly changed its path, causing him to be injured. Seeing Wu Qi cough up blood, everyone's hearts jumped. Wu Qi was clearly incredibly powerful. But in front of Long Chen, who was risking his life, he was unable to do anything at all. As for Long Chen, he was completely calm. Even after 2 exchanges that could have cost him his life, his expression still didn't change. That kind of icy calmness was absolutely terrifying. Wu Qi became infuriated. He had all kinds of powerful attacks, but both times he was forced back by Long Chen. Just as he was preparing to once more attack him, Long Chen's bone blade appeared before his face, just about to cut off his head. He hastily twisted his head and jumped back. He just narrowly managed to avoid Long Chen's attack. But unfortunately, he had forgotten one thing. This was not the outside world, but the death-deciding stage. It was only a couple 100 meters wide. After Long Chen's previous 2 attacks, he had already been forced near the edge. Now that he had jumped back. With a loud bang, everyone was dumbfounded to see Wu Qi's head slam into an iron pillar. But it went without saying that his peak mid-tendon transformation power was extremely great. Despite having shot back like a cannonball and then crashing into the pillar, only a trace of blood flowed down his head. However, he was still extremely dizzy for a moment, stars appearing in his vision. But then realizing what situation he was in, he quickly recovered. He had only just recovered from that bout of dizziness when he saw Long Chen's bone blades cutting a strange arc towards his stomach. It was so fast that he didn't have time to dodge. In his fright, he threw his sword right at Long Chen's heart. His sword wasn't as long as Long Chen's bone blade, so in order to force him back, he had to throw his sword. That way his attack would arrive a bit faster and Long Chen would have to dodge, allowing him to escape his present predicament. But what appalled everyone was that Long Chen still ignored the blade, continuing his attack. Two weapons cut through flesh. Long Chen's bone blade stabbed through Wu Qi's stomach. But a sword was sticking out over Long Chen's heart. For a moment, everyone was deathly silent. Chapter 226 Killing Wu Qi. The entire crowd was deathly silent. Tang Wanna felt the world spinning around her and she directly fainted. It was Yi Zhiqiu who caught her. No matter how strong a cultivator was, unless they had stepped into the Xiantian realm, a stab through the heart was absolutely fatal. None of them had expected Long Chen to really die along with Wu Qi. Ling Yunzi and Tu Feng were both dumbstruck. Wasn't it said that divergence could only be killed by the heavenly Daos? Was Long Chen not a divergent? The two of them were filled with regret. If they had known earlier that Long Chen wasn't a divergent, they wouldn't have had so many misgivings and would have gone all out to groom him into their strongest disciple. How could it be like this? Wu Qi looked at the bone blade piercing through his stomach. His organs had all been destroyed, and his life was quickly fading away. It's because you're afraid of death while I am not. Long Chen's expression was still as icily calm as it had been from the start. It was as if he didn't even care about life or death. I don't want to die. I want to live, Wu Qi bitterly cried out. Would you have acted differently if you had known this would be the result? Back when you were tormenting Little Snow, back when you were about to end Little Snow's life, back when you were acting like some powerful dictator, did you think this day would come? Get on your way. Long Chen pulled his bone blade out of Wu Qi's stomach. Everyone could clearly see Wu Qi's stomach. A foot-long hole had appeared there and his broken organs fell out, causing him to immediately die. Please, sect leader, please go save Long Chen. Suddenly, every single disciple present knelt down towards Ling Yunzi. What was surprising was that even Gu Yang and Lei Qianshang were among them. Ling Yunzi shook his head helplessly. If it had been his own heart that had been stabbed through, then with his Xiantian realm cultivation base, he was able to use the natural energy to heal it. But Long Chen had yet to step into the Xiantian realm, and so he was unable to endure that natural energy. His body would immediately explode from that power. Looking at the kneeling disciples, Ling Yunzi couldn't help sighing. Was this the power of Long Chen's charisma? Even his previous mortal enemies were begging to save him. My brother Long hasn't died, so why does he need to be saved? Wild looked at everyone with confusion, scratching his head. Suddenly the death-deciding stage's gate opened up again. The rebirth monolith also stopped falling. From the start to now, it had only descended half a foot. The fight had ended too quickly. In just 4 moves, Long Chen had killed Wu Qi. It had just taken a couple breaths of time. But those couple breaths had passed so slowly that all of them had felt as if the entire 2 hours had passed. It had been that shocking and alarming. Seeing that figure slowly walk out of the death-deciding stage, everyone was filled with worship and regret. That sword was still stabbing through his heart. As soon as it was pulled out, he would immediately die. Even if it wasn't pulled out, he wouldn't be able to hold on for more than a couple breaths. Everyone mourned for his passing. Boss, don't die, I'm still counting on you to bring me throughout the world. Guoran was the first to rush up and wail. Long Chen frowned and took out a drop of liquid from his spatial ring, swallowing it. Then he grasped the hilt of the sword. Blood flew as he pulled out the sword. No! Everyone let out startled cries. By doing this, all his blood would rush out and he would immediately die. As he pulled out the sword, Long Chen felt that drop of divine life energy healing his heart, quickly fusing the injured portion. It stopped bleeding in just a breath. As he had thought, that spirit world expert had truly been powerful. This thing she had left behind for him was incomparably precious. He would definitely have to be careful with how he used it in the future. But at the same time, he remembered her last words. These drops of divine life energy were a kind of contract. He would need to help her out in the future. Long Chen truly wanted to go to that so-called spirit world, but that kind of thing was far too distant for the current him. Boss, you're not dying. Guoran was shocked. The opening on his chest had rapidly fused back together, and he couldn't help babbling out nonsense. Long Chen was about to say something when exhaustion battered him, and he felt a burst of dizziness. He had lost too much blood for now. Although that drop of divine life energy had healed him, it wasn't able to make up for his blood loss that fast. Boss! Guoran immediately ran up to support him. Long Chen shook his head around, still feeling a bout of weakness overcome him. He had lost too much blood. It would probably take him a long time before he could advance to the 11th heaven stage of blood condensation. Long Chen had only just managed to steady himself slightly when a fragrant breeze blew over and a soft body embraced him. The instant Tang Wanner had awoken and seen Long Chen still alive, she couldn't help hugging onto him and crying. Long Chen, you scared me to death, you scoundrel! Tang Wanner had become like a little child again. Her tears streamed down her cheeks. Hey, I like that you want to hug me, but can we find somewhere without others looking? With so many onlookers I can't really, Long Chen bashfully whispered into Tang Wanner's ear. Bastard! Tang Wanner raged. She wanted to give him a punch, but seeing how pale he was, she decided against it and ran off. Boss, Guoran didn't really know what to do. Just let her go. It'll be good for her to vent some of her emotions, laughed Long Chen. He then turned and cupped his fist towards everyone. They had all begged the sect leader to save him. Whether they were sincere, fake, or just going with the crowd, Long Chen still accepted that emotion. Everyone hastily got up and bowed in response. They then scattered from this place. They all knew that this matter had reached its conclusion and there was nothing else for them to see. If they still didn't leave now, they'd just be shooed off. Everyone quickly left, including the elders and law enforcers. Now it was only Wild and his master, Ling Yunzi, Tu Fang, and Long Chen. Excellent! Ling Yunzi looked at Long Chen with praise. His strength had already surpassed his expectations. Long Chen's strength wasn't in his cultivation technique, it wasn't in his physical body, nor was it in his battle skills. His strength lay in his will. In front of an enemy he couldn't possibly defeat, he still didn't feel the slightest despair or panic. That kind of will was something that even those old elders had not achieved. Thankful for the praise, sect leader, Long Chen slightly modestly said. Long Chen felt a great deal of respect for those who both had powerful cultivation bases yet still remained virtuous and upright. I've already heard of what happened. The monastery's rules truly do have gaps, but I do not possess the authority to change those rules, sighed Ling Yunzi. Long Chen shook his head. There are no perfect rules in this world. Even heaven and earth are imperfect, let alone man-made rules. So thank you for the support, sect leader. This little one was brash and refused your good intentions, and so please forgive me. Ling Yunzi hadn't been optimistic about Long Chen's life and death challenge, and that was why he had given Long Chen so many warnings. Although Long Chen had had his own difficulties, he truly had put Ling Yunzi in a tight spot. But despite that, Ling Yunzi had never expressed his displeasure to him. That kind of amicability and temperament had convinced Long Chen that Ling Yunzi was worth his respect. It's good that you can think about it in that way. Your wounds are fine, right? Asked Ling Yunzi. He sensed that drop of divine life energy Long Chen had swallowed was extremely miraculous. It had immediately healed the fatal injury to his heart. That was practically inconceivable. Even the elders of the healing hall were absolutely unable to do that. The healing hall's disciples' spiritual qi had the greatest effect on outer wounds, but as for inner wounds, they were almost powerless. They could only rely on a slow nourishment method, and that kind of effect was not even as good as using medicinal pills. Thank for you the care, sect leader. Disciple is fine, smiled Long Chen. Although he still felt weak, he was quickly being restored. The only regretful thing was that he had lost a great deal of his essence blood. He would need a long time to replenish that, which really did give him a headache. "Little fellow, you're not bad. Do you want to take me as your master?" Wild's master had becoming increasingly pleased with Long Chen. "Absolutely not." Ling Yunzi and Tu Feng both shouted out at the same time. Currently, Long Chen was no longer the same as he had been when he had just entered the monastery. As his cultivation base had grown, the heavenly Daos had already concealed some of his oddities. Divergence fundamentally could not exist amongst mankind. If he were to take Long Chen as an apprentice, he would be infected by powerful karma. That was not something he would be able to survive. Long Chen had joined the monastery, but the Xiantian Monastery was just a branch of the Xiantian Supermonastery, and the Supermonastery belonged to the entire Xiantian Dao sect. That was also why Ling Yunzi, as a small sect leader of a branch monastery, did not possess the authority to alter any rules. Yet it was also because of that powerful backing that the Xiantian Monastery was the strongest sect in its region. The Xiantian Dao sect possessed millions of years of history. Long Chen wouldn't be able to affect such a huge existence with his karma. And even if he did, it would dilute itself throughout the entire Xiantian Dao sect, which would weaken its effect so that it wouldn't be too severe. But if someone dared become Long Chen's master, then that would quickly bring about heavenly punishment, maybe killing him immediately. And so both Ling Yunzi and Tu Feng immediately opened their mouths to shut this down, not leaving any room for discussion. Wild's master became infuriated, raging, "Who said it's not all right? If I say it's fine, then it's fine. What? Do you dare oppose me?" That old man had a violent temperament, and being refused flat out like this immediately provoked him. Ling Yunzi felt a headache. He knew that once this uncle master of his became angry, he could overturn the entire monastery. Tu Feng hastily gave Long Chen a meaningful glance. Although he didn't understand what was going on, seeing that they refused this so seriously, Long Chen trusted them and apologetically said, "I appreciate your kindness, but I'm used to being with my fellow brothers now, so I can't accept seniors' good intentions." That old man finally calmed down. It wasn't as if he absolutely had to have Long Chen as an apprentice, but it was simply that Ling Yunzi and Tu Feng's attitude had provoked him. Long Chen wished to stay with his fellow brothers, and that was enough for him to see that Long Chen valued his comrades. That was something obvious just from seeing those disciples willing to kneel down for him. Seeing that old man finally calm down, Ling Yunzi and Tu Feng let out a sigh of relief, grateful that Long Chen was so sensible. Long Chen suddenly thought of something and his hope immediately rose. To the old man, he asked, "Senior, do you have any high-rank magical beast essence blood?" That you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.